factors. This will be something that also shapes, what happens in the classroom. May policy ba ang school which promotes collaboration, critical thinking, and does the teacher like align her work or her or his work dun sa vision na yon ng school, no? So it's a convergence of many factors, and what you try to do in qualitative research is to try to understand, how these various factors can influence or shape the activity. Okay, I hope that made sense. And I'm sorry, I think I exceeded the time. All right, thank you very much. All right, just let me just stop my screen share and just say one last word. No, I encourage everyone to, as you do your research, to be always curious. Okay, to ask many questions, and as I emphasized in my presentation, well, know thyself. What is your lens? What are your beliefs? Why are you approaching questions the way you want to approach them? All right. Thank you very much for listening in, participating in our session today. Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much po, Dr. Thank you so much po, Dr. Talawe. It is indeed important to carefully determine the research design and the research questions, but it is also important that as researchers, we look into our own positionalities and reflexivity, because they would allow us to examine our own biases, assumptions, and perspectives, and this might impact the research process and the findings. So at this point po, let us proceed to show our sincere thanks and appreciation to our resource speaker. Let me present po the certificate of appreciation. So let me just read po the citation. Republic of the Philippines, Laguna State Polytechnic University, Province of Laguna, College of Teacher Education, Graduate Studies and Applied Research awards the Certificate of Recognition to Dr. Frederick Talawe in recognition of his invaluable and exemplary service rendered as resource speaker during the CTE GSAR Research Webinar Series with the theme Reinforcing the Graduate Students' Research Capability Towards Increased Research Outcomes, held on March 4, 2023 via Zoom conferencing, given on the 4th day of March 2023, Laguna State Polytechnic University, Siniloan, Laguna, signed by our University President, Dr. Mario Arbiones. Once again, thank you so much po, Dr. Frederick Palau, for that.
Maraming salamat din po. Good afternoon sa lahat.
Maraming salamat. So at this point po, we shall have po our lunch break. But before you leave po the meeting room, may I request everyone po to please turn on your cameras for some photo opportunities po with Dr. Talawe. So we apologize po, medyo nawala po yung ibang participants because right now po nagkaroon po ng power interruption. So nangalahati po yung participants. So anyway, we'll have po the photo opportunity. So please turn on po your cameras. Yes. Oh. Okay po, so we have 2 slides po. Please hold your smiles as I get po a screenshot of each slide. So 1, 2, 3. Po, just one moment po. I'll just paste po the first slide. Please hold your smiles po. One moment lang po. Hold your smiles po. 1, 2, 3. Okay po. Thank you so much po for coming, and we'll have po a lunch break. Please be back po at 2 p.m. with the same meeting link. So for the afternoon session po, we'll have 2 more resource speakers. So once again po, thank you so much po, Dr. Talawe, for that engaging talk.
Thank you po.
Thank you.
Thank you po. Doc Jem.
Yes po, Doc.
Oo, yan. Kakabalik lang ng kuryente. Pa-post po muna ng recording. Kaya bang i-post?
I-try ko po.
Strengths of the relationship, as well as the type of the relationship. It allows you to explain what you see and what is seen. But take note that correlational research does not delve into cause and effect. Although you may be able to determine the relationship between and among the variables that you are describing, you are not able to determine which is the cause and which is the effect, or what are the effects. So, on the other hand, with quasi-experimental research, as the prefix quasi suggests, so in the vernacular, it's parang, no? Parang experimental. So it's not experimental. It's like, looks like experimental. So here, you can examine cause and effect relationships. But however, there is less control by the researcher as compared with true experimental designs. Because here, the samples are not randomly selected, and the variables in the study cannot be controlled by the researcher. Most quasi-experimental designs are used in social sciences, including education. In education, for example, we cannot have a true experimental design because that will mean controlling most of the variables, and we can only do that in the laboratory. So therefore, experimental designs are mostly in the natural sciences or engineering, but quasi-experimental designs are often used for social sciences and education. In educational settings, for example, we cannot, to adhere to ethics, we cannot disrupt the normal routines in an educational setup. Therefore, we cannot have full control. That's why it's quasi-experimental in terms of design. Now, what are the main characteristics, on the other hand, of experimental research? So here, there is controlled manipulation of at least one variable, no? And there are at least 2 groups, the experimental group and the control group. And then you assign the samples or the participants to both groups, to each of the groups, to the experimental group and the control groups, which, by the way, you cannot do in a class. If you're using a classroom-based research, no, where it involves all the students in the classroom, you cannot divide the class and assign one group of students to the control and the other one to the experimental, because that would be in violation of the ethical principles of do no harm, no, or making sure that there's equity and equitability, no, and fairness and justice. No? So in the case of experimental research, as is often done in laboratory or even in engineering, you can assign participants or sample to the experimental group and to the control group. Now, what's the aim of the experimental research? So really, in the end, when you do experimental research, you're looking at cause and effect relationships. It clearly establishes cause and effect because it is highly controlled, it is objective, and it has a systematic approach. You know? It also involves the measurement of the independent variables, which are the cause or causes, and the dependent variables, which are the effects. You know? So if you want to look at cause and effect, that would be experimental research. If you want to look at cause and effect, but with little control, that could be also quasi-experimental research, no? But not the true experimental research design. Now let's check your understanding. Okay. Let's say that the principal collects data about hours work, like age, sex, geographic area of the teaching staff over a 10-year period. What type of research would this be considered? A, descriptive research. B, correlational research. C, quasi-experimental research. D, experimental. Can you put your answers in the chat box? Okay, so most of you answered A. What about the rest? Some are not answering. Okay, so I see A. Okay, so let's see. Is this correct? Correct. Okay, your answer is correct. A. So quantitative research methods are classified into 4 categories. Descriptive. So in this case, you simply define the magnitude of a concept and its characteristics. In correlational, you determine associations. In quasi-experimental, you test an intervention, but it lacks control in at least one of the 3 areas. And finally, experimental, test an intervention includes both a control group and experimental group that are randomly assigned. So in this case, the research study is designed to define the magnitude of an idea and its characteristics. Okay, so let's continue. These are the important concepts in the quantitative research process. I will be discussing each of these so that for clarity. No? So I'll be talking about basic research, applied research, rigor, control, extraneous variables, and sampling. So what is applied research? As the term applied implies, it's an attempt. No? Applied means real life, no? Application to real life. So there are 2 kinds of research that were previously classified by the National Research Council of the Philippines. No? Basic research and applied research. No? And in most of the books, no, in the early parts of the 19th century, describe research as either basic or applied. No? Basic when it's theoretical and it leads to knowledge expansion, no? Formulation of more theories, principles. Applied when it is used in practice, so it has a practical application, and it leads to the betterment of human life, no? Or for humankind. So applied research attempts to solve real problems in practice. It studies the effects of the intervention that may have on the sample, and these effects on the sample can be externally valid for the entire population. And applied research applies the findings in the real world, used with the real people. So that's what we mean by applied research. Now, why is rigor important in research? No? So as you can see on this slide, rigor strives for excellence. No? So when we do research, we have to make sure that we follow its rigors. No? Meaning, it adheres to validity and reliability, that it should be precise in terms of measurement, and we are using a sample that is representative of the population. So there should be a tightly controlled study design. And of course, rigor suggests logical reasoning used in the explanation of the data that you will gather in terms of precision, accuracy, detail, and the order that is required. So rigor is important to be able to address internal validity, meaning that the causal relationship that we can find between the treatment and the outcomes can be explained by the variables being studied, and that the results that are found are consistent among the subjects, which of course refers to reliability. So you have to look at the reliability and validity in terms of the design in the internal structure of the research. Now, external reliability and validity will refer to, external reliability, we will look at the results and whether they can be consistent across different ways by which it was used. And validity, external validity, is if we can generalize what we found in our participants with those in other settings to a larger population. Now, excuse me. What measures of control are utilized in quantitative research? No? You can look at it as rules that we need to follow so that we decrease the possibility of error in determining the design of our study. No? So here we can vary the levels of control. We can vary in terms of using either a quasi-experimental study where we can partially control selection of subjects or participants. In experimental studies, the sample must be selected based on, all the members of the population must be given equal chance to be selected in the experimental group. No? So there is no, there is randomness. No? So for example, the control variables as displayed, no, in this example, in a research where the question is, does red light affect plant growth? No? So the independent variable here is the color of the light, yellow or red. And then the dependent variables will refer to plant height. No? And the control variables, the rest will not be observed, only the light. So the control variables are water, soil, temperature, and the day and night time. So we have to keep it in control. It should be the same for the plants under the red light and under the yellow light. No? So this is an example of how measures of control are utilized. Okay. Now, control in quantitative research, as presented in this matrix, are either varies, no, as we go from one research setting to the next. No, in the case of descriptive research, the research setting is natural, so therefore it may be partially controlled, but the researcher has no control. No? But if you're looking at correlational type of quantitative research, you may partially control under natural settings or even partially controlled settings. But for quasi-experimental, there is definitely partial control from both the researcher and the settings context. And then experimental research design there's high level of control from the researcher, and the research setting is usually in the laboratory. Now, I've mentioned about variables. No? So in quantitative research, you try to describe, correlate, and determine cause and effect, no? Either of the three. So let's say we have an independent variable, and we want, and the independent variable or variables are said to be the causes, and we want to know how it affects the dependent variable or variables. So we want to know if the independent variable or variables affect the dependent variables in some way. So this is what we call this. You can either use a quasi-experimental design or a true experimental design for this purpose. But there are other variables that could come into the picture. Unfortunately, these variables are referred to as extraneous variables, but we are not interested in these variables, but they might also affect the dependent variables in some way. So the influence of extraneous variables can be decreased, no? And this can be done through various means. One is by selecting the samples appropriately and the use of defined research settings. Now, I've spoken about sampling and sampling methods. In sampling methods, you can either do random sampling, stratified sampling, systematic sampling, cluster sampling, as you can see on the figures here. The figures represent the types of sampling methods. No? You can also look at multi-stage sampling, convenience sampling, and voluntary sampling. So sampling methods refer to process of selecting subjects or participants who are representatives of the population. When you do random sampling, you make sure that each member will have an equal chance of being selected. No? You can use several approaches to random sampling, like the use of random numbers and other means that will ensure that each of the members of the population will have equal chance to be selected. Okay, it has the most control. And then in convenience sampling, where you can do that in descriptive studies, social science studies, education studies, that involve descriptive, correlational, or quasi-experimental design, because you can only rely on whoever is available or volunteers. No? Okay. Now, settings. In quantitative research methods, you can do the research in natural settings or field settings, or you can also do it in partially controlled settings, like when you do it in the classroom, for example, or in a given institution, while highly controlled or laboratory settings are done in the laboratory. Now, on this slide, I'm presenting the steps in quantitative research. So unlike qualitative research, which follows a different path, no, which is more iterative, as well as action research, which is highly cyclical, repetitive, and iterative, quantitative research follows a framework that is shown on this slide. No? So you start always with the research problem and purpose, and then you review the relevant literature. Nowadays, you have to do a critical review of relevant literature, which is different from the review of relevant literature that we are used to doing. No? Then you formulate the study framework based on the literature reviewed. And then you formulate the research objectives, your research questions, and as researchers, you pose possible answers to your research questions in the form of hypothesis. And then you delineate the variables that you are going to study, or the constructs that you will look into to address the research problems, and then formulate your research design. After that, determine your population and sample, and then do the measurements, no? Because quantitative research methods follow the positivist paradigm, where you look at everything, the constructs and the variables, to be measurable. No? Unlike qualitative research paradigms, which are interpretivist, quantitative research paradigms follow the positivist paradigm. No? So from the measurement methods, which means you can measure everything, no? If your assumption is that of quantitative research designs. Then you collect the data, analyze the data, present, interpret, and analyze the data, and then discuss the outcomes in relation to how it has addressed, no, or answered the research problem. And from there, you can recognize the limitations of the research design, as well as you will be able to generate recommendations for further research. Now, let's start with the research problem and purpose. No? I'd like you to understand the difference between the two. When you say research problem, it's an area of concern that needs research. So what the problem does is that it identifies the research situation, it describes or predicts the research situation. On the other hand, when you say research purpose, it comes from the problem and it identifies the specific goal or aim of the study. So here, the purpose includes the variables, the population, and the setting for the study. Now, literature review, I will go through each of the processes here. No? So I start with research problem and purpose. Now I go to review of relevant literature. When you review relevant literature, you actually collect pertinent, no, relevant literature. This is to give you an in-depth knowledge about the problem. As I said, the best approach is a critical review, but a critical review of the literature requires another seminar perhaps, no? Because it's not that easy to do a systematic review of the literature. When you do a systematic review for quantitative researches, you do a meta-analysis, no? Which is very popular, no, nowadays. In the advent of work at home, no? In my research classes, we have delved into systematic reviews, no, like meta-analysis. So of late, no, lately for the past 2 years, we have been doing a lot of meta-analysis. I require this with my students. They can come up with a thesis proposal or a dissertation proposal unless they do a systematic review of the literature. Because doing a systematic review will enable one to see the gaps in the literature. You will be able to understand what needs to be done and what needs to be further studied. In that way, your research is not simply a redundant form of action, but rather allows you, the researcher, to come up with new knowledge, thereby contributing significantly to your field. And literature review involves understanding, therefore, what knowledge already exists so that you can make changes in practice. So particularly if you're doing action research, it is best to do a systematic review prior to the conduct of action research. Although action research at first, you may have to look at what you are doing in your practice, but you will also have to find out what is being done in relation to that practice in other contexts, okay? So the third step is the study framework. No? When I say framework, I'm referring to the basis for your study. So it can be a theoretical basis that will enable you to link the findings of your study to the existing body of knowledge. So frameworks come from theories. When I say theory, as the literature will suggest and as often described by authors, theory is an integrated set of defined concepts and relational statements that present a view of a particular phenomenon. And you can use this to describe, explain, predict, or control the phenomenon. So this will serve as guide as you conduct your research. So after that, you are now able to define with clarity your research objectives, your research questions, and also formulate hypotheses. No? So as you can see from this slide, you identify the relationships between the variables and indicate the population to be studied. So from the broad area, you're able to identify the problem by doing a critical review of the literature and looking at the current trends. And then once you have your problem in place, which you have narrowed in focus, you will be able to formulate your research questions, okay? And this will involve inputs from readings, from experts, from your peers, looking at existing frameworks, or using certain protocols. So from the research question, you will now develop your study design so that you can test your hypothesis and prove your hypothesis to either be true or false. And then this will lead you to smaller or finer objectives of your study. Now, let's again check your understanding. Let's say we have a teacher who is interested in conducting research on active engagement of students in online classes. What is the next step in the research process? A, defining the purpose. B, conducting the literature review. C, selecting study variables. Or D, performing a pilot study. Please write your answers in the chat box. A, B, C, or D? Okay, I see answers of A, B, A, B, A. Okay, B, A, B. Okay, let's see. A, okay. So, what is next? The correct answer is B. So, to generate a picture of what is known about a particular situation and the knowledge gaps that exist, researchers should conduct a review of relevant literature. When we say relevant, it refers to those sources published that are pertinent or highly important in providing the researcher in-depth knowledge of ideas about the selected problem. So this background will enable the researcher to build on the work of others and to avoid unnecessary and redundant work. Now, let's move on to the study variables. Variables are concepts that are measured, manipulated, or controlled in a particular study. We can have concrete variables like temperature and weight, or abstract variables like creativity and empathy. I say concrete variables, temperature and weight, because they're actually instruments that can directly measure these variables. They're called concrete variables. But some variables are abstract. It's difficult to measure creativity. You may come up with a problem situation, perhaps, or a task where the individual can show his or her creativity. Empathy is another abstract variable. So therefore, in research, we have to give conceptual definitions or meaning to the variables that we're studying. So we call it an operational definition if we're defining the variable as it is used in the study. And the variables come as the independent variable, which is our treatment or intervention variable that is measured or manipulated, and which we say as the causes. And then the dependent variables are response variables. Those are the ones that we observe as aspects of the behavior of the participants that has been stimulated by the independent variable. And of course, the variables of interest are the ones that we correlate. And the control variable is a variable in a situation where we cannot study it at the same time. So therefore, these variables must be neutralized. Okay? Now, assumptions are very important in the conduct of research, no? Because when we do research, we have assumptions. These assumptions can either be universal assumptions or assumptions that are based on existing theories, or assumptions that warrant, no, or warranted assumptions or unwarranted assumptions. But there are assumptions also that need conduct of a research. So we look at the literature and find out whether those assumptions met what the research has shown. So these are statements that are usually taken for granted because they are considered to be true. But often, they are unrecognized in terms of thinking and behavior of the subjects or the participants. So the sources of assumptions are universally accepted truths. So they are often embedded in the philosophical basis of the studies framework. So the assumptions that we have as a researcher must be found in the framework of the study that we are conducting. Now, limitations of the study. No? Restrictions, we call it restrictions in a study, that this can actually affect the credibility and generalizability of your findings. No? Now, it's important to note that whether or not limitations are addressed in the research report you are reading, because the authors are supposed to report their identified limitations. This is an important section in a research report. And if you are the research consumer or the reader, you may also note additional limitations not addressed by the authors or the ones that conducted the research. And this is an important area for critique. I ask my students, always to prepare one-page critique paper after I've asked them to read a particular article, because I want to develop in them this understanding that there are limitations to a particular study and they have to be able to recognize such limitations. Now, the limitations can either be theoretical or methodological. We say it's theoretical if it restricts the generalization of the findings as reflected in the framework and the definitions. It's true, the results are true based on the existing or the framework that was followed by the study. Methodological limitations, on the other hand, restrict the population to which the findings can be generalized. Although the findings of the study are such, we can only say that the findings happen because this population are characterized by this. No? So it can be a result of unrepresentative sample or weak design. Now, the success of publication will depend largely on a sound study design. So as researchers, we have to make an effort to avoid methodological limitations. But of course, we can recognize that there are instances where we can truly be restricted by theoretical limitations. And this can be addressed by making sure that we have read everything that has been done so that we can understand previous mistakes in previous researches. Now we go to research design. Doing good research means a sound study design because it's the blueprint for conducting the study. So the elements include the purpose statement. The settings have to be clear, the techniques utilized, the timeline, the methodology, how it was measured, the variables, and then limitations and objections, and the analysis. So we have to understand that we have to maximize control over these factors because these factors could interfere with the results of the study. And the research design should also direct the selection of the population, the sampling methods, the methods of measurement, the plan for gathering data, and analysis of data. Remember that research is basically problem solving. So in finding solutions to our research problems, depend largely on the following: the type of data collected, the clarity of the problem, and the plan, which involves setting goals or objectives so that you can address the problem and identify solutions. And then part of it is also implementing the right intervention, and then evaluation and revision. Now let's move on to the difference between population and sample. When we say population, these are actually all elements that meet the certain criteria for inclusion in the study. And the sample is a subset of the population that is selected for the study. So let's say our population are all women students in higher education institutions. And our sample could be women students at De La Salle University. So a sample is a subset of a population. Now, when we say measurement, because quantitative research designs are positivist in paradigm, it means everything is measured. We can assign numbers to objects or variables. And the application of rules is founded on the development of a measurement device or an instrument. But data are gathered at various levels, measurement levels, we call it. And the classical approach is we either classify the data as ordinal, interval, ratio, nominal. Now, so as you can see from the schematic diagram here, if the order of data variables is undisputable, if it is undisputable, then we classify it as variables that may have fixed unit of measurement. But if doesn't have, then we call it a nominal variable. The number is just used to categorize, but the number has no meaning. Now, when the data values have fixed unit of measurement, but it doesn't have a zero value, that's as an ordinal variable, which only means you rank. But if it has a zero value, where zero means nothing, then it's an ratio variable. But if the zero does not mean absence of the characteristic, that's an interval variable. So one of the things that I usually tell my students who are interested to do or who are doing quantitative research design, the very first step is to identify whether your variable is a nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. Because the main tool in quantitative research is statistics. And in statistical analysis, there are different types of tests for different types of variables. If you want to correlate nominal with ordinal, ordinal with interval, or nominal with interval, you have to use varied or different correlation tests. Also, when you describe the variables using descriptive statistics, there are statistical measures for nominal variables, different for ordinal variables, and for interval variables. So unless you know what type of categorical variables you have, whether categorical or metric, you will not be able to use the appropriate statistical test. So you also have to examine the reliability and validity of your measurement tool. When I say reliability, I'm referring to the consistency of the tool, the accuracy, the precision. Validity, on the other hand, if the tool, like the survey instrument, for example, does it really measure what it is supposed to measure? Okay. So after you have measured the variables, let's now proceed to data collection. Now, data collection or data gathering is a precise, systematic gathering of information, evidences, or data for the study. And these data are often represented by numbers. That's why it's called quantitative research design. So everything that you study here are in numbers, expressed in numbers. It's necessary that consent be obtained from the participants or the sample. So here, in data collection, researchers may use varied ways. You can observe, you can conduct survey questionnaires, you can use existing data or artifacts. You can conduct focus group discussion, which is a more effective way compared to the individual interviews, because this will require more time. And this data collection should be described in detail under the method sections of your research article. One of the things that editors and research proposal reviewers look into in research proposals or any research study is the methodology. And the key word here is transparency. You have to make the methods and the methodology transparent to the reviewer, to the reader, so that it can have validity and replicability. Now, let's check your understanding. I will now refer again to the chat box, and I would like to see your responses. Sorry. There is a teacher researcher who is involved in selecting a sample for a research study on staffing ratios of faculty over students. Which statement best describes the difference between a population and a sample? A population is usually larger than a sample. B, a sample is usually larger than a population. C, populations and samples are synonymous. D, there is no relationship between sample size and population size. What are your answers? Can I see your answers? A. Okay. So, that's correct. The population refers to all the elements. It can be individuals, objects, or substances that meet certain criteria for inclusion. The definition of the population would depend on the sample criteria and the similarity of subjects in various settings. So definitely, a population will have is usually larger than a sample. Okay, now we go to the data analysis. In quantitative research methods, we use two kinds of statistics. Statistics is a tool in research, because quantitative research studies deal with numbers, and the best way to describe the numbers and to infer data from the numbers is to use statistics, which operate with the principles of probability. So we analyze data so that we can reduce the data into more understandable chunks, organize it so that we can give meaning to the data. And it is in this context that we use descriptive or inferential statistics. We use descriptive statistics if we are simply describing, showing, and summarizing the data, organizing it in such a way, present it in either a tabular format, or we can present it using a graph so that it's organized, and we can easily see whether there is a trend, if there is a relationship, and this will allow us to describe, basically, that's why it's called descriptive. And the types usually include measures of central tendency, like mean, median, mode, measures of variability, how the numbers vary with respect to the other numbers in a given sample. So here, the results are shown with the help of charts, graphs, and tables. By the way, even the type of figures, the kind of data or variables will help you. Like you can use pie chart for nominal variables. Bar graphs are usually used for interval variables. and you can use the histogram, no, to determine mean, no, to look at the means of interval data. No? So the kind of data dictates also the kind of graphs that the appropriate graphs that you have to use. Now, for inferential statistics, it's not merely to describe. This time, you are trying to compare, you are trying to test the data and predict from the data. So you're actually explaining the chance of occurrence of an event using probability. So you reach the conclusion about the population through inferring from the sample and using statistics, probability, to determine if whether it can happen also to the population. So therefore, you have to establish that your sample is representative of the population. So whatever you infer from the sample will find validity also to the population. So there are estimations of parameters and testing hypotheses. And the results are shown with the help of probability scores. Now we go to the results. Results are simply descriptions of your findings after you analyze the data. Usually you organize it by research objectives or following the chronology of your research questions or hypotheses. No? Now, in most papers, the results and discussion come as one section. But there are also journals which adhere to the format where the results are presented first as a separate section and that the discussion is another section. So when you present the results, this includes the experimental data, but no interpretation. You also incorporate the statistical analysis whenever it's applicable. You follow the sequential organization when you present the data, following the flow of your research objectives, questions, or hypotheses. Here you can include text, figures, and tables, and you do not speculate because these are results, okay? Now, when you go to discussion part, you have to explain any surprising, unexpected, expected, inconclusive results. No? Explain everything. As a researcher, it is your duty to provide plausible explanations. Then in the discussion, you also have to list all the major findings of your study, interpret it, and explain. Then you need to mention any limitation and relate it to what others have done. So you discuss it in the context of how other researchers have found out. No? Now, in reporting research outcomes, there are basically two types of research. We have the technical reports and the popular reports. No? The outlines of which are presented on this slide. No? So at any rate, in any research report, you should generally see the following items. You should be able to see how the data was interpreted, no, in a meaningful manner. It should enable the researcher to form conclusions and consider implications, like implications for a particular program, like nursing program, for example. And you can use the report to suggest future studies. And if it has it's externally valid, the report should be able to generalize the findings. Now, the major sections of the research report includes the abstract, the introduction, the methods, the result, the discussion, and the reference list. These are the essential parts also in a research article that will find its way to publication in journals, peer-reviewed journals. So you have the summary, the abstract, which is a summary of your study in at least 200 to 250 words. No? And then you have the introduction that includes your problem, purpose, the relevant literature, your framework, and your hypothesis or hypothesis. Then the method section, you talk about your research design, the research participants, the setting, the tools or instruments that you use in measuring. The results is where you present your data, analyze the data, and interpret. And then in the discussion, this is where you present the major findings of your study, draw conclusions, and discuss in relation to previous studies and draw implications. And finally, the reference list, where you only include sources that are cited in the manuscript. Now, what is the best way to skim a research report? Because this is needed when you review relevant literature. No? So reading a research report is actually time-consuming. No? You do not want to read in detail the reports that are not meaningful, no? Especially if you're doing a experiment-based project. No? But there's a way to quickly skim report to ascertain how closely it relates to your research question. You can review the source, no, for broad overview, and then you can read the title, the author's name, abstract, introduction, and discussion. No? Examine the conclusions and implications and give your preliminary judgment of the study. So when you read an article, you have to critique it and reflect on it, okay? By skim reading, rereading again, asking yourself a number of questions, and then interpret the results and summarize the paper. Now, what questions are important in an initial research critique? You have to ask yourself, what type of study was conducted here? What was the setting? What were the steps for the research process? Were they clearly identified? No? Were any steps missing? Or did the steps logically link together? You can actually use this critique checklist. You look at the introduction, the literature review, the research approach, whether the analysis or discussion is comprehensive, whether the conclusion was able to capture or condense the paper. You look at the writing style. Is it polished, within the academic standards? Does it adhere to the use citations manual? Or does it contain no plagiarism? So you subject your paper to plagiarism check for originality. And most often, journals accept 80% originality, meaning you can only refer to other sources 20%. And that the arguments that are presented or the problems follow from assumptions and guided by the theories, and don't take the criticism of the reviewers on a personal level. No? Remember that the reviewers only read what you have submitted, in case of submission to a journal. No? Now, other important questions when you're critically appraising a research report looks into the validity, trustworthiness of the results, value, and relevance. So is there depth for accuracy, completeness? Was the research process logically presented? And are there critical arguments in the discussion section? So in more detail, quantitative research involves experimental design, quasi-experimental design, and non-experimental design, which are basically descriptive design studies. Whereas interventions are used in either quasi-experimental or experimental, in non-experimental design or descriptive studies, you do not have an intervention. You merely describe what is found in the natural setting. No? Now, you can correlate all the variables that may affect the dependent variable, or you can use a predictive model. No? Now, in most cases, journals, especially high impact journals, do not accept descriptive studies that are not thoroughly discussed. So unless they are thoroughly discussed, wherein you're able to discuss it with reference to other previous works, and you're able to gain new knowledge and able to come up with models or variables that could predict or explain the relationships, then it might be accepted. So what does a research design look like? Remember, it's a blueprint for conducting a study, which should include the purpose, review of literature, and framework to provide the basis for the design. And characteristically, it has to be neutral, reliable, valid, and has the capacity to generalize. So a research study either explores, explains, or describes. So the purpose of a research study is to describe the variables, and then you also use it to examine relationships. You explore to determine differences, provide plausible explanations. You use it to test a treatment in order to explore and explain, and to provide a basis for evidence for practice, or a combination of these things. No? So, in summary, the quantitative research designs are descriptive, correlational, quasi-experimental, and experimental. But the thing that you have to remember in the design is that the design of quantitative research study must match with the purpose. Okay. So if the purpose of the research is to describe, then you can use a particular research design. No? You can use either. No? If you want to explain, explore, evaluate, improve practice, usually you use case action research if you want to improve practice. If you want to explore, you can use and describe, you can use case study, ethnographic, and you can also explore using longitudinal design. If you want to explain and explore, you use experiments, quasi-experimental, or cross-sectional design also to explore and evaluate. And the research questions also will tell you the type of research methodology for collecting data. Okay? As an example, it would not be appropriate to have a purpose of describing a set of variables with an experimental design, which is really meant to test a treatment or an intervention. So the research questions, you can collect data using survey, interviews that are either individual or focus group. You can observe, and then you can have reflection groups. No? Nonetheless, you have to be able to follow the 3 E's. No? Inquire by asking questions, examining documents, archives, and archival data, and experience through observations. So in terms of descriptive designs, we have the typical, comparative, and case study. No? So cross-sectional or longitudinal are the most commonly used design. We say it's cross-sectional study if it involves field study and field survey. And the difference here is being the size of the sample. For longitudinal, these are studies in which an event or occurrence is measured again and again over a period of time. This is also known as the time series study. So through longitudinal studies, the researcher comes to know how the market changes, for example, over time. So both examines characteristic of a single sample. You are able to identify the phenomenon, the variables, the conceptual and operational definitions, and describe the definitions. For comparative descriptive designs, you are examining differences in variables in 2 or more groups that may occur naturally in a setting. And the results obtained from this analysis are frequently not generalizable to a population. So this can take the form of descriptive classification that is employed in natural science subjects, descriptive evaluative, which involves appraising carefully the worthiness of the current study, descriptive comparative, where you will consider at least two variables, and establish a formal procedure where you can compare and conclude that the one is better than the other. Then you have correlational survey designed to determine the relationship of at least 2 variables. And then longitudinal survey, which involves more time allotted for investigation of the subjects at 2 or more, or measurement of the variables at 2 or more points in time, but still no intervention. Case study design. This is when you explore a single unit of study. It can be an individual, a family, a group, or a community. So here, even though the sample is small, the number of variables studied may be large. No? So the design can be a source of descriptive information to support the theory or to invalidate the theory or theories. A case study also has the potential to reveal important findings, which can generate new hypotheses that can be tested. But there is no control. These are the do's and don'ts of a case study. You have to identify the purpose of your study. A case study has focus and increased concentration. The next is to read easy, unbiased general sample, and then to create your schedule and follow it. Then you segregate major and minor data, and then that will allow you to address the strengths and weaknesses. That will leave you to define the limitations of the case study and then develop counter hypotheses. Now, correlational designs come in 3 forms: descriptive correlational, predictive, and model testing. Okay. When you want to describe relationships between and among variables, you have to use the descriptive correlational design. If you want to predict relationships between and among variables in descriptive correlation, you use the correlation analysis. No? In predictive correlation design, you use an extension of correlation, which is regression. No? And then if you want to test theoretically proposed relationships, you come up with model testing, such as structural equation modeling, among others, or factor analysis. Now, benefits of an experimental design. If you do an experimental design, there is more control, and conduct of the study is also very clear. No? There is increased internal validity, therefore, decreased threats to design validity. And there are fewer rival hypotheses. You can easily identify the cause and effect, and you can further analyze the relationship to determine more in-depth ideas. So the data that you collect serves as a foundation in which you build more ideas and conduct more research. Now, the essential elements of an experimental design is shown by the principles of experimental design. That it should be replicated, meaning you will be future researchers or interested researchers can replicate the same treatments to study the variation of the effects, such as yield, for example. And then randomization will entail distributing the treatments to the experimental units by probability mechanism. And then local control is applied to reduce error by arranging the experiment units in blocks. So there's random assignment, there's researcher-controlled manipulation, and the researcher controls the experimental situation, including the control and comparison group. There's control of variance, where the researcher clearly spells out the sampling criteria, defines the independent variable, and measures the dependent variable accurately. Now, you also have study groups, especially in comparative descriptive studies. So you have to be able to identify initially the possible subjects and then randomly assign controls for the different subjects, the experimental group and the control group. So if you want to do comparative descriptive studies, you look at the experimental and control group and randomly assign subjects for this. And then you study the testing conditions. These are actually the identical conditions, so you can control the extraneous variables. And then you have the independent variable, the cause. So, for example, you use music in one class and no music in the other class, the control group. And then you study students' behavior in terms of test scores for both music and non-music classes, and then which are actually the effects, and then you look at the difference. Now, for randomized clinical trial, this design uses large number of subjects, and you want to test whether a treatment's effect is comparable with a control group who did not receive the treatment. So the subjects come from a reference population. There is randomization of subjects, and usually multiple geographic locations are used. So you have the treatment group, control group, and there's follow-up. You measure again, and then compare the results. And then you can increase the groupings by looking at geographical locations or time period measurements, like measured during specific time, like in the case of Philippines, wet season, dry season, although we now have wet and wetter. In other countries, you have the seasons, but these are now being affected by climate change. Now, interventions in experimental research. So interventions should actually result in differences. In terms of educational setting, we usually look at the post-test measures between the treatment group and the control or the comparison group. So interventions in education or social science research can come in the form of physiological, psychosocial, educational, or a combination of either of these three interventions. And at the rate of knowledge explosion and numerous studies that have been conducted in the field of education, psychology, and social sciences, several systems for interventions have been developed. Okay. Now, relevant to design, we have the concepts of causality, probability, bias, control, and manipulation. Causality is whether we see a cause and effect relationship between the variables. No? The simplest view, as you can see from this diagram, is one independent variable causing a change in another dependent variable. But and confounding variable can change these effects. No? So the independent variable X causes Y, a change in the dependent variable. Causality would mean A causes B to happen, like in the case of high blood pressure can lead to ulcer. And then multi-causality of heart disease, for example, it can be due to years of smoking, high-fat diet, or limited exercise, among others. Now, conditional probability is the likelihood of an event occurring based on the occurrence of previous events or outcome. So you look at variations in variables to occur. So we can look at conditional probability as relative causality. So what is likelihood that a specific cause will result in a specific effect? Bias is the slanting of findings away from the truth. Now we can see in this figure major sources of bias in clinical research, like in the planning stage, if there is a flawed study design or selection bias. And in the actual implementation, if there's interviewer bias, chronology bias, recall bias, transfer bias, or misclassification of exposure or outcome, or performance bias during implementation. And in the data analysis, if there is bias after the trial, like in terms of citation, when you do when you try to choose which literature to include in your discussion, no? And to avoid this, you have to do a systematic review to avoid publication bias. No? So bias distorts the findings. So research design should be developed to reduce the likelihood of bias or the control of bias. Now, what are the potential causes of bias and how is it minimized? So as you have seen in the previous slide, causes can be due to the researcher's bias, the components of the research setting, the sampling, how the groups were formed, the tools that were used for measuring, the data collection process, the period of study, the statistical test, and the analytical interpretation. And to minimize, for example, observer bias, we can assign random subjects. We can do blind studies. We can assign multiple observers. We can train the observers. We can standardize the procedures or the protocols and use double-blind studies. And also be diligent while running an experiment. So let's test your knowledge, okay? Use the chat box. The purpose of a control in a study design is to A, establish the credibility of the researcher. B, highlight the design flaws. C, increase the probability that the results are true to reality. Or D, interfere with the validity of the findings. Your answers, please. A, B, C, or D? May I see your answers in the chat box? So I see C. C. Yung iba? Okay. Okay. Others? Also C. Okay, so C. Tingnan nga natin. The answer is C. Okay, very good. Oh, so naiintindihan talaga nila. So as control increases, the likelihood that the study findings are an accurate reflection of reality increases. So it's C. Now, what are the factors influencing control? No? Let me just close my chat box. So you can implement control throughout the design. You can improve the accuracy of the findings by influencing the control. You can increase in quasi-experimental studies the control. And of course, control is greatest in experimental research. No? For example, if you look at factors that may affect academic performance and how you can use the students' academic performance to enrich their instructional plan. You have to use both personal factors and external factors, okay? And you can look at different contexts, like students who are in senior high school, students that are in the lower levels, or students in the alternative learning system. Now, manipulation. There are three types of manipulation. No? Straightforward, which can either be stimulus or instructional. You have the stage or event manipulation, and you have the subject or participant manipulation. No? Manipulation is involved in the implementation of a treatment or an intervention. No? Here, the independent variable is controlled, but we must be careful to avoid the introduction of bias, no? And usually done in quasi-experimental and experimental designs. So it's stimulus manipulation if we have different conditions used, no? And then instructional manipulation if different groups are given different instructions, no? And then stage manipulation if you manipulate the characteristics of the setting or the context. And finally, subject manipulation if there are pre-existing differences between the subjects in different conditions, which leads to a quasi-experimental study. Now, for a strong design, you can see here, no? If you look, this design is strong in such a way that there is a controlling environment and the study setting is identified. There's an equivalence of subjects and groups. There's a controlling treatment, a controlling measurement, and control of extraneous variables. So there are three types of instruction: computer-assisted, lecture, and discussion. And you investigate the anxiety levels of the students as either high or low, which is the main effect of the type of instruction. Now, I would like to end my talk by giving you some questions that you could use when you critically appraise a study design, because you will, the secret, no, in being able to do a good research is that if you continuously read, you have to read research papers to have a better grasp of the different kinds of study design, no? So when you read, you have to look at the type of design. What type of design is identified? Is the study design linked to the objectives, the questions, and the hypothesis? Can you see a link among these elements of the study design? Were all the variables in the study manipulated or measured? And were there extraneous variables, and how were they identified and controlled? And what were the threats to internal validity or external validity in the study? How adequate was the manipulation of the variables? What elements should have been manipulated so that the validity of the findings can be improved? What was the basis in assessing the adequacy of the design, and how valid are the findings? And then you can also ask, is there another reasonable, valid, plausible explanation that rivals the hypothesis given by the authors to explain the study findings other than what has been proposed? So I think those are good questions that you have to consider to critically appraise a study design, especially if they are quantitative research designs. Okay, I end at this point. Thank you for listening, and I will open the floor for questions, should you have any.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prudente. Indeed, selecting a sound method in research is very crucial because it determines definitely the quality, the validity, and the reliability of the research findings. So at this point, we shall have an open forum. So should you have any questions or clarifications, you may tap the raise hand button so that you could be recognized, or you may also send it in the chat box. Okay, so if you have any questions, you may tap the raise hand button, or you may also send it in the chat box.
I have already uploaded the PDF copy of the presentation in the chat box.
Thank you so much po, Dr. Prudente. So for those who would like to get a copy of the PDF or I mean of the PowerPoint, it's already been uploaded on the chat box. So I guess po there is no question coming from the participants.
Okay, I
So-
hope it means that everything is clear.
Mhm. Yes,
There
ma'am.
are no
So
confounding understandings.
thank you so much po for that comprehensive speech on quantitative research methods. So at this point po, to show our sincere thanks and gratitude and appreciation to our resource speaker, let me present the certificate of recognition. So let me just read the citation. Republic of the Philippines, Laguna State Polytechnic University, Province of Laguna, College of Teacher Education, Graduate Studies and Applied Research awards the certificate of recognition to Dr. Maricar S. Prudente in recognition of her invaluable and exemplary service rendered as resource speaker during the CTE GSAR Research Webinar Series with the theme Reinforcing the Graduate Students' Research Capability Towards Increased Research Outcomes, held on March 4, 2023 via Zoom conferencing, given on the 4th day of March 2023, Laguna State Polytechnic University, Siniloan Campus, or Siniloan, Laguna, signed by our University President, Dr. Mario Arbiones. Once again, thank you so much po, Dr. Maricar S. Prudente, for that comprehensive presentation on quantitative research methods.
Okay, you're welcome anytime as long as it doesn't interfere with my schedule.
Yes, ma'am. So at this point po, may I request everyone to please turn on your cameras for a photo op with Dr. Prudente. So please turn on po your cameras and hold your smiles. We have 3 galleries. So give me a minute po to get a screen grab. So hold your smiles po. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have the first gallery. Second po, hold your smiles. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. Hold your smiles. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so thank you so much po again, Dr. Prudente. At this point, we shall have a health break. So you have po until 3:30. So we'll have po the last session at 3:30. So you may drink water, you may go to the lupo if you'd like to, I mean you go to the restroom or whatever it is that you'd like to do in your health break. So you have
Okay,
po,
goodbye everyone.
goodbye po ma'am. Thank you po ulit.
Bye-bye.
Po, ma'am.
Thank you po.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Dahil State University, ang LSPU, asahan mo na bukod sa quality, ang education ay abot kaya pa ito. Hindi limitado sa 4 na sulok ng silid ang pag-aaral mo dito sa LSPU. Maganda ang pagsasanay dito para sa paghahanda ng kinabukasan mo. Pinaghuhusay ng LSPU upang maging balanse ang buhay estudyante namin dito. Inihahanda kami ng LSPU upang maging mga leader at kapaki-pakinabang at mabuting mamamayan ng ating bansa.
For more than 67 years since 1952, the LSPU has been one of the drivers of Laguna's immense economic progress. As one of the more than 100 premier state universities of the Philippines, the LSPU has provided quality education to create capable leaders and workforce to help Laguna sustain its growth. The LSPU is the largest state university in the province of Laguna, providing excellent and subsidized education to more than 27,000 students in 4 strategic campuses located in Santa Cruz, Siniloan, San Pablo City, and Los Baños. Each LSPU campus provides instructional expertise in their specialized field and offers bachelor's, associate, and certificate programs in various fields of study. The LSPU also offers higher education programs in education.
Ang main campus ng LSPU ay matatagpuan dito sa Santa Cruz. Meron pong mahigit 10,000 estudyante ang nag-aaral dito. Bukod po sa tourism na aking kinukuha, ang pag-aabogasya at nursing ay unique dito sa LSPU Santa Cruz. LSPU Santa Cruz also offers courses on the exciting fields of engineering and information technology.
Meron pong mahigit 5,000 estudyante na karamihan ay nag-aaral sa larangan ng agrikultura dito sa LSPU Siniloan. Ang pinakamalaki pong campus ng LSPU ay matatagpuan dito. The LSPU Siniloan also provides excellent instruction in the fields of agroforestry.
Dito naman po sa San Pablo Campus, marami ang nag-aaral ng kurso ng Education, Information Technology, Engineering and Industrial Technology, Hospitality Management and Tourism. Ang LSPU San Pablo ay mayroong mahigit 8,000 na estudyante sa loob ng mahigit 5 ektaryang pasilidad nito. Meron rin pong isa sa 2 graduate programs dito para sa education.
Dito po sa LSPU Los Baños, matatagpuan ang isa sa pinakamagandang kurikula sa fisheries sa bansa. Isama nyo na rin dito ang matibay na mga program sa education, food, nutrition, and dietetics, hospitality management, at tourism. Mahigit 5,000 estudyante ang nag-aaral dito sa LSPU Los Baños.
All 4 LSPU campuses provide programs for teacher education, computer studies, hospitality management and tourism, arts and sciences, criminal justice education, and business management and accountancy. For international competitiveness, the LSPU has developed partnerships and cooperation with foreign academic institutions and corporations to provide students and staff with insights and experience on education, research, and training on a global level. Aside from the modern amenities, the university strives to provide and improve its gymnasiums, libraries, and other associated venues needed for a balanced student life. Providing the best possible educational environment and experience has always been a priority at the LSPU. The LSPU endeavors to tap into the students' potential to help nurture them to become productive, responsible, and successful members of our society. The LSPU has made remarkable accomplishments by providing and advancing knowledge in multidisciplinary fields essential for the development of young individuals.
Tunay po na ang ating kinabukasan ng bayan ay nakasalalay sa ating mga kabataan sa pagbibigay ng matibay na pundasyon para maabot nila ang kanilang pangarap. Matutulungan rin ang ating bansa na maabot ang minimiting pagunlad. Ang tagumpay ng ating mga kabataan ay tagumpay natin lahat. Ang tagumpay ng ating mga kabataan ay tagumpay natin lahat.
Dahil State University ang LSPU, asahan mo na bukod sa quality ang education ay abot kaya pa ito. Hindi limitado sa apat na sulok ng silid ang pag-aaral mo dito sa LSPU. Maganda ang pagsasanay dito para sa paghahanda ng kinabukasan mo. Pinaghuhusay ng LSPU upang maging balanse ang buhay estudyante namin dito. Inihahanda kami ng LSPU upang maging mga leader at kapaki-pakinabang at mabuting mamamayan ng ating bansa.
For more than 67 years since 1952, the LSPU has been one of the drivers of Laguna's immense economic progress. As one of the more than 100 premier state universities of the Philippines, the LSPU has provided quality education to create capable leaders and workforce to help Laguna sustain its growth. The LSPU is the largest state university in the province of Laguna, providing excellent and subsidized education to more than 27,000 students in 4 strategic campuses located in Santa Cruz, Siniloan, San Pablo City, and Los Baños. Each LSPU campus provides instructional expertise in their specialized field and offers bachelor's, associate, and certificate programs in various fields of study. The LSPU also offers higher education programs in education.
Ang main campus ng LSPU ay matatagpuan dito sa Santa Cruz. Meron pong mahigit 10,000 estudyante ang nag-aaral dito. Bukod po sa tourism na aking kinukuha, ang pag-aabogasya at nursing ay unique dito sa LSPU Santa Cruz. LSPU Santa Cruz also offers courses on the exciting fields of engineering and information technology.
Meron pong mahigit 5,000 estudyante na karamihan ay nag-aaral sa larangan ng agrikultura dito sa LSPU Siniloan. Ang pinakamalaki pong campus ng LSPU ay matatagpuan dito. The LSPU Siniloan also provides excellent instruction in the fields of agroforestry.
Dito naman po sa San Pablo Campus, marami ang nag-aaral ng kurso ng Education, Information Technology, Engineering and Industrial Technology, Hospitality Management and Tourism. Ang LSPU San Pablo ay mayroong mahigit 8,000 na estudyante sa loob ng mahigit na 5 ektaryang pasilidad nito. Meron rin pong isa sa 2 graduate programs dito para sa education.
Dito po sa LSPU Los Baños, matatagpuan ang isa sa pinakamagandang kurikula sa fisheries sa bansa. Isama nyo na rin dito ang matibay na mga program sa education, food, nutrition, and dietetics, hospitality management, at tourism. Mahigit 5,000 estudyante ang nag-aaral dito sa LSPU Los Baños.
All 4 LSPU campuses provide programs for teacher education, computer studies, hospitality management and tourism, arts and sciences, criminal justice education, and business management and accountancy. For international competitiveness, the LSPU has developed partnerships and cooperation with foreign academic institutions and corporations to provide students and staff with insights and experience on education, research, and training on a global level. Aside from the modern amenities, the university strives to provide and improve its gymnasiums, libraries, and other associated venues needed for a balanced student life. Providing the best possible educational environment and experience has always been a priority at the LSPU. The LSPU endeavors to tap into the students' potential to help nurture them to become productive, responsible, and successful members of our society. The LSPU has made remarkable accomplishments by providing and advancing knowledge in multidisciplinary fields essential for the development of young individuals.
Tunay po na ang ating kinabukasan ng bayan ay nakasalalay sa ating mga kabataan sa pagbibigay ng matibay na pundasyon para maabot nila ang kanilang pangarap. Matutulungan rin ang ating bansa na maabot ang minimiting pagunlad. Ang tagumpay ng ating mga kabataan ay tagumpay natin lahat.
Once again, good afternoon, everyone. And now we are down to the last topic for today's session. This is about research and research proposal writing in social sciences. Our resource speaker is an associate professor and the chair of the Department of English and Applied Linguistics and the former director of the Lasallian Institute for Development and Educational Research of the De La Salle University. Here is the divine Dr. Shirley N. Dita. It is a pleasure and a privilege to have you again po as a resource speaker. Once again, Dr. Shirley N. Dita. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, LSPU. Okay, parang kailan lang I was here, I was reviewing my FB, and it says I was here, I was with you virtually.
Yes,
in
Doc.
April last year, tama ba? So,
Yes, Doc.
wala pang isang taon, no? So, that's what I told Ma'am Elaine last time na sana sa susunod kong lecture kako sa LSPU, it's going to be in person na, pero we are still online. So, sasabihin ko ulit yun ha, Ma'am Elaine. I hope that the next time I am invited, that LSPU is going to be already an in-person lecture. Okay, because I think I mentioned also last time, my husband's family is in Santa Maria, and I've been to Siniloan many times. So I really am excited to visit LSPU probably soon when things are better than the current situation. Okay. Kumusta kayong lahat? Kaya pa ba? This is already the 4th lecture for the day. Okay, I can understand. TMI na ba? I mean, too much information. I can imagine what most of you are feeling right now. Parang just too much to process. No? Parang ang dami ng narinig magmula pa kaninang umaga. We started with research ethics by Dr. Ronald Baitan. Okay, so he laid the foundation on what kind of research ethics we need to observe when conducting research. So we started with that one because it's, it's the like hot topic in the world of research now. So they're talking about ethics. As a matter of fact, there are some journals who already require endorsement from universities or organizations that the articles you submitted went through research ethics review. Okay, and then after that one, Dr. Talawe, Fred Talawe, talked about qualitative research, okay, and he shared some points by which you can some points that you can adapt when you'd like to utilize qualitative research for your chosen topics. And then just a while ago, Dr. Prudente talked about quantitative research. Okay, so I was actually thinking that my topic should be at least be after ethics, okay, or at least before quanti or quali. But it's also good that you have listened to quanti and quali first before we talked about proposal writing. Okay, by the way, congratulations to Doc Elaine Nachon for coming up with this kind of activity. Okay, I just got a lot of inquiries as well from other universities, like how did LSPU partner with DLSU, how can we also ask DLSU to, give a series of lectures to our students? So like I'm busy responding to everyone because they're asking, Mom, can you join? I said, no, I think it's just for the LSPU people. And they said, how come they have exclusive like audience? I mean, why are they the exclusive audience? So I have to explain. So I really am glad that the admin of LSPU pursued this kind of project, because this is very important. I mean, everyone is talking about research. So let's get into our main business for today, okay? So I hope that this is not just sharing or listening to lectures, okay? Of course, the challenge will always be what comes next after the series of lectures, okay? I want you to know, my dear students of LSP, that you are very fortunate to have listened to, I would say, top researchers of the LSU. I mean, they selflessly shared their own tips, okay, and knowledge in conducting research. Okay, so for my part of the project, I'll be talking about research and research proposal writing in social sciences. Initially, I thought that it's all about grant, proposal for grant, because when we talk about research proposals, what I always have in mind would be if the university, for example, would like to write proposal for external grants, because some universities already focus on that one. How can we get external funding, especially from big funding agencies, okay, in the Philippines or abroad, okay? And there are some rules or tips, okay, or policies that we need to keep in mind when we'd like to request for external funds. But I figured that most of the, or if not, the majority of the participants for today are all students. So what I have in mind is that probably they need some tips on how to propose research, or how to start the research proposal writing in the field of social sciences. So I just focus on that. Okay, I had to remove the parts on proposal writing for grants. Okay, there will of course be overlapping of some topics since they are interrelated. Okay, so I'll probably be covering some points that Doc Fred covered earlier, or Doc Prudente has already covered, and that's because the topics are interrelated. Okay, so I'll try to discuss or focus on the following. So I'll give you just a very brief backgrounder on research proposal writing in the social sciences, but the bulk of my lecture will be all about writing research proposal, and I'll be focusing on those important components. There are other components, but I'll focus on this one, like writing the introduction, writing the RRL, formulating the research questions, and then the methodology. I know that Dr. Prudente has already covered some of them, okay, although what she did is that she extended until writing the discussion. Okay. Yes, I'll be sending a PDF copy of my PowerPoint, just so you don't have to take down notes while listening. Okay, I'd be happy to, you just have to listen to me. Okay, I also want you to interact with me while I'm discussing all this stuff. Okay, just to make me feel that I'm not talking to students who probably are already sleeping or doing something. Okay, let me feel that I'm not talking to myself. Okay, I'd love you to interact with me. I'm always checking the chat box. Okay, so if there is, at any point in my lecture, if there's anything that you'd like me to clarify or discuss more, okay, just send in any question, and I'll be checking the chat now and then. Okay, so this is how the lecture will go. So I'll start with just some backgrounder on research proposal writing. Of course, you know that I'm not so sure where you are now in your research. Okay, so I'm just thinking that most students, okay, part of their academic requirements would be they have to do thesis, okay, at the end. And for a thesis, you have to do the proposal first. Some universities require title defense, okay, before you can even start with the proposal. And then after the proposal, of course, you will go to the final defense. So what we are going to cover will be just the proposal writing. So I will not go to the other chapters like writing the results and discussion and the conclusions, but just focus on the usual parts of a research proposal writing. Okay, you know, research proposal writing is a very specific genre of writing. Okay, even if you claim to be a good speaker of English, even if you claim to be a good writer, for example, you've been writing for your school paper or doing some journalistic writing, research proposal writing is just a different genre, and it's very specific. Okay, more so if you are writing for funding, for example. So that's another very specific genre because there are some things that you need to consider. So, but what I'll be focusing on would just be like research proposal in general, like in the social sciences. Okay. And, you know, the research proposal writing the stakes are usually high, of course. I mean, if you're applying for funding, that means you're looking for millions. And why would this funding agency entrust their funds with your university or you as the principal investigator? Or if you are proposing for a thesis, okay, why would the committee allow you to work on this one? Which means that will, you know, you will be awarded your degree, okay, and it's going to be like the permanent proof of your academic capability. Okay, so you see the stakes are really high, and so this has to be taken very seriously. So a good research proposal takes time, you know, multiple drafts, okay, a clear understanding of the task at hand. Okay, you can't just, you know, sleep or you know, when you wake up the next day you already have a proposal. Okay, or you don't sit down the first time, open your laptop, okay, scribble some ideas, and then presto, you have already the research proposal writing. Okay, so it takes time, you know, it takes a lot of reading, okay, there's a lot of drafting and so forth and so on. Okay, I think that's pretty obvious based on what you have listened to for the whole day. Okay, what's the purpose of a research proposal in the first place? Of course, that's pretty obvious, but I still have to discuss this one with you. So the first one would be to persuade your reader of the value of research question. Okay, I just mentioned that in some universities they also require title defense, like they need to first approve whether, okay, you see. Okay, wait, just give me a minute because some people are already like, Dr. Dita, we are still hoping that you can send us the link to the lecture. Okay, I have already asked Dr. Nashon, so I'll just send the link to some. Okay, only a few. Okay, there you go. Another one is that to show that you have a clear idea of where your research sits in existing knowledge. Okay, don't forget that you will be contributing to the existing knowledge on this particular topic. Okay, so if you have interesting ideas to contribute to the existing literature, to the existing knowledge on this topic, or to the existing body of information on this topic, okay, then come up with a proposal. Okay, so that's why there are like some experts that need to validate or allow or approve your research, because you know they know more about the literature. Okay, so when you do a proposal on a particular topic, make sure that you have a very clear idea of what you're talking about, or where your topic, okay, actually sits in the existing knowledge. Okay, is it something new? Is it something controversial? Is it just a follow-up of what has already been investigated early on? Okay, are you extending what another scholar has started? Okay, is it part of the recommendation of another study? Okay, so that should be clear. And another one is your proposal also demonstrate how you plan to answer your question. Okay, and that's the most important part of the research proposal, the research questions. Okay, so there are different kinds of possible research outcomes in the social sciences. Okay, I mean, even the scope of social science is at times a bit blurry. Okay, for one, the field of linguistics, for instance, in most instances, okay, linguistics is subsumed under humanities. Some, just like in the PSSC now, linguistics is also subsumed under social sciences. So like the field of social sciences is now like more encompassing. Okay, there are I mean, the coverage, the scope could be extensive. Okay. So like, are you proposing an empirical analysis? So like that has to be very clear to you. Okay, or is it a conceptual analysis, or is it a normative analysis? I think Doc B has already started talking about this one. Okay, do you wish to generate new theory, or are you going to test existing theoretical frameworks? What I have seen so far is that there are some people, especially I would say the neophyte researchers, okay, are not very confident in generating new theory. Okay, there was already a research claiming that in most, I mean, in the case of undergraduate thesis, okay, or even in the master's thesis, okay, they usually just test existing theoretical framework. Okay, that's why, you know, you have a theoretical framework, and then you're going to test if this one works on this particular data or set of participants. Okay, so you will just be affirming that the existing theoretical framework is true. For example, you're just validating it. Okay, so very few actually do the first one, like you do experiment or you do something, you investigate, and from there you come up with a new theory. Like, so what theory have, for example, so far been generated from the study? Okay, the third one is that, do you have a burning desire to turn the theoretical assumptions of your field on its head? Okay, so those are the things that you need to like even ask yourself. Okay, that's why you want to pursue this kind of topic. Okay. Your research proposal needs to answer 3 basic questions. Okay, we're just talking about proposal, not the whole thesis yet. Okay, I just simplified it. Okay, but these are like the basic things that you need to answer. Like, what is your research puzzle? Okay, like, what's your problem? What are you trying to find out? Okay, like what's the situation? What's the research puzzle? Okay, and then you also have to ask, why is it important? Okay, I mean, why will you be investing time and effort here? It must be very important. Okay, how relevant it is. Okay, is it how relevant to the current literature? I mean, to the changing times. Okay, so it should be very clear to you why your topic is important. Okay, otherwise, if you can find any relevance of your study, okay, or if you don't think it is that important, probably it's not worth pursuing at all. So that has to be very clear to you. And then if you have like you have already identified like the research puzzle, okay, and you think that it's very important, you'd like to investigate this one, so how do you propose to resolve it? Okay, so very simple question. So how are you going to do it? Okay, so if you have this topic in mind, for example, you think that it is very important, okay, it's very interesting, you need to investigate it, okay, and this is what you intend, this is how you intend to investigate it. This is how you're going to resolve it. So this is like the methodology that you need to follow to be able to answer the research puzzle. Okay, so we will now go to the, that's just a background, that we will now go to the like parts that you need to work on if you are to do a research proposal. Okay, so usually this is the first phase of any research. Okay, you have to propose first. You have to let people first like validate or check or assess that your topic is worth investigating. So I'm looking at like students who will be doing the research proposal or the proposal defense or the proposal writing stage. Okay, so as I mentioned in the introduction, we have the the introduction, then we have the review of related literature, then we have the research questions, and then we have the methodology. Okay, those are like the most important components. Okay, there are others, for example, like the significance of the study, okay, which are, you know, can be covered already in the introduction. Okay. The way that you will be writing these parts don't have to be like linear, okay, or progressive. Now, based on my experience, okay, I mean, if I have this topic, I usually, you know, I mean, after doing the preliminary reading, of course, okay, I start with the research questions, okay, and then, you know, the RQs and the methodology are always paired up. So this is what I want to investigate. This is what I want to ask. How am I going to do that? Okay, so there's equivalent methodology to that one. Okay, and this one is over and so on. The truth is, after doing everything, I usually go back to the introduction. Okay, but you know, that's unofficial. You know, that's just some researchers have different ways of attacking research. Okay, so but of course, in the book, they will ask you that you have to start with introduction. Okay, and that's understandable because you have to know first your topic. Okay, when you say introduction, you know, an introduction may be many different things. Okay, depending on the type of writing that you are doing. Okay, so in an empirical paper, a proposal or research paper, an introduction does three things. Okay, so first it introduces the topic. Okay, and then it reviews the literature of your topic, and it states your hypothesis, okay, or your objective or your research question. So that's what intro is all about. Okay, so when you say introduces your topic, that's even vague. Okay, so when you say you are going to introduce your topic, you have to do a lot of things. Like you have to, you know, explain the key concepts. You have to like provide the background of the study, provide the context of the study. You have to provide the status of this topic. Okay, what is everyone telling about this topic? What is everyone doing about this topic? What has been done about this topic, and so forth and so on. Okay, so when you write the intro, okay, again, I'm not saying that this is the first thing that you have to do, right? Okay, it's all up to you. I mean, if you are comfortable starting with the RQs, then you can go back to intro later on. That should be fine. Okay, but when you do write the intro already, so those are like the things that you have to consider. Okay, so the introduce, the create, tell, state, explain, and then the present. Again, when I say introduce your topic, there are some key concepts that you need to introduce. Okay, do not assume that the readers already know the background of the topic, okay, or what the topic is all about. So it is your responsibility as the researcher of this particular topic to introduce the key concepts about the topic. Okay, if there are jargons, if there are technical terms that you need to elaborate, you need to explain, then that's part of the introduction. Okay, I mean, if the title of your research contains some jargons or some not so familiar terms to ordinary people, okay, then you also have to explain those concepts. Okay, and then create some context and background. Some people, okay, that's what they usually ask upon reading the introduction. Okay, for example, if you talk about, let's say, obesity or cyberbullying, for example, or you know, mental health issues or whatever topic that is. Okay, and then you have to like provide the context and the background. Are you referring to, for example, the mental health issues of students, or is it the teachers? Is it people in general? Okay, where are we? What kind of students you are referring to, or what kind of learners you're referring to? Okay, is it in the elementary? Is it in the high school? Is it in college? Okay, are we talking about Filipinos? Are we talking about Asians in general? Are we talking about foreigners, international, and so forth and so on? So that has to be clear. Okay, then tell your readers about the research that you plan to carry. Okay, so that now you start talking about the topic already. You start talking about the research that you're going to study. Okay, what you intend to do, how you're going to do it. Okay, the state the rationale would be, why are you even doing this? Why are you even pursuing this topic? Okay, you have to mention the importance. You have to mention the relevance. Okay, so you have to convince your readers that it is really worth investigating. Okay, so you have to like state your rationale. There are some scholars that would say, research is research. You don't even have to rationalize your research. You don't even have to state why you need to conduct your research. But some experts require that one, okay? Because there are some scholars who think that, that's the most important topic, or that's the most important like direction that they can go to, okay, in relation to the topic. Okay, but there are actually other directions or potential directions. Okay, so it's important that you state the rationale, okay, that the importance of it, okay, or why it's even relevant. Okay, so explain why your research is important. Okay, and then and to do that one, okay, you need to, of course, present the review of related literature, which we will do later on, I mean, after the introduction. So when you are writing the intro, just some tips, okay, so you have to define and explain concepts. I just said this one a while ago. You've got to explain jargons, okay? Usually, the title already contains jargon. So unless readers would see the explanation of specific jargons, okay, they will not stop like looking for the sections in your proposal that would explain these jargons, okay? Again, I would repeat that you do not assume that ordinary people understand some very specific academic jargons. For example, you say, for example, in the field of linguistics, okay, you are interested in one topic, say translingualism, okay, or translanguaging, okay, and since everyone is talking about translanguaging, you think that there's no need to elaborate on that technical term anymore, because everyone is talking about it. Okay, it's like it's just a buzzword in linguistics right now. So you don't explain anymore in detail, okay, and then you just do the usual route or thing, okay, but you cannot assume that all the time. Consider like the average readers, okay. Probably there are some readers even in the field of linguistics who may not be interested in translanguaging. They are in the field of language education or linguistics, but they're doing something else. They're probably into theoretical linguistics. They're probably doing language documentation, okay? Or even if these areas are interrelated, okay, they're probably heard it once or twice, but have not really read a lot about this topic. So that's what you need to do. You have to explain jargons, okay? You need to explain complicated concepts for an average reader, okay? And when I say average reader, it's not, it doesn't mean that, the people who will be reading your research proposals are only those who are interested in the topic, okay? There are some people who are just randomly looking for topics that they want to work on, okay? And then when they read your paper, when they read your topic, okay, it actually it actually interested them. So keep that one in mind, that you are writing for not really just experts, okay, but consider also the average readers, okay? So what should they know about your topic, okay? How are you supposed to explain key concepts about the topic, okay? Some people do this one. If you are not good at it, or if you don't have an appropriate quotation to start your intro with, then do not attempt. Otherwise, how will I say it? Parang kitang-kita kapag ka pilit, okay? But this is very Pinoy, okay? In most cases, Filipinos just love starting their whatever task with a quotation, or they usually end also with a quotation, because they believe that it would wrap up everything that they said about the topic, okay? So if you can find a really appropriate quotation, okay, something that you think it would capture your reader's attention from the beginning, then you can do that, okay? Sometimes the readers would be, after reading the quotation, they'll like be looking for the connection of this quotation in the beginning that they saw, okay, they're looking for the connection of that one, okay, with the whole research. So make sure that if you start with the quotation, you have to go back to it at some point in the research, okay, especially at the end of the research, okay. Why did you even start with that one? So if you can find an appropriate quotation, you can also include the striking stats or statistics, okay, like you would, for example, say that 3 languages at least die every second. Okay, that's a very striking stats. Okay, and depending on how you phrase it, okay, stats or figures or statistics can really stimulate the interest of readers, depending on how you phrase it or depending on how you use it. Okay, but do not make controversial stats just for the sake of getting the attention of your readers. Okay, again, make sure that your stats have basis, okay, that it's well grounded, okay, but you can use the one as an opening. Okay, you've got to communicate also your structure. Okay, in the introduction, like you have to already explain how you intend to conduct the research. This is just part of the introduction. Of course, there will be methodology section where you are going to in detail explain how you are going to conduct your research, but somewhere the intro you already have to explain, okay, how you are going to, I mean, how you intend to conduct the research. For example, like you will be getting samples from all over the country, focusing on, for example, the 3 big islands and the natural capital region, something like that. Okay, so I mean, if that's what you intend to do, or early on, if you just want to focus on, say, a particular locality, say, I will just be focusing on Laguna or Calabarzon, and that has to be very clear in the introduction. Okay. Communicating your structure will help the readers also navigate the parts of your research. Some scholars do this one. They speak in the first person point of view, and that's perfectly okay. Some research articles do that. Okay, for example, in this study, I will first explain the key concepts, and then I will discuss this one, and then I will present blah, 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 and finally, I whether it's a research paper or a conference paper, sometimes it is very important that you communicate your structure, okay, in any sections also of your paper. For example, in the introduction, you say, in the introduction, okay, I will first define the key concepts, and then I will then go on explaining, for example, providing, for example, the context of the study, and from there, I will start the review of related literature, and then we'll provide the synthesis afterwards, so forth and so on. That kind of communicating your structure, okay, so that readers will know that, oh, okay, so this is how the paper will go. Okay, so they will expect something like that early on. Now, without this like aspect of the intro where you are going to describe the structure of your paper, your readers will be like wondering, so what's going to happen next? Or at times they're not even interested to go on anymore because there was no clear description of your structure or structure of the paper. Okay, so that's the introduction. So just to sum up the intro, it is very important that in the introduction, okay, you have to, that's why it is introduction. You have to introduce your topic. Okay, that is, you have to provide the context or the background of the study. Okay, what is happening in this topic in the literature? What's the status of this topic at the moment? Okay, why is it important to pursue this topic? Those things. Okay, and then you have to explain like key concepts, and then from there, okay, you have to convince your readers that in coming up, okay, in pursuing this topic, you have reviewed thoroughly the literature. Okay, this is very important because usually this is one of the pitfalls. Okay, scholars just come up with a topic. They think that it's very interesting. They think that it's something novel, it's something new, and they really want to pursue it. Okay, but they have not read the literature, or they have not at least exhausted the literature. Okay, and that's very dangerous. For one, because people probably, I mean, there might already be, I mean, there or someone has already done that. Okay, so it's just a duplication of what has already been written. Okay, or it could also be like dated, okay, topic. Yeah, that's why you have to really look at the literature. I mean, is this topic still interesting? I mean, who has already done that? And then since you were late a bit in looking for topics, okay, when you check the literature, you found out that it's something that has been discussed in, say, early 2000, and it's already 2023. Okay, and so it's very important that you have to first check the literature. When I say literature, I mean the body of articles, okay, or whatever that's written about this topic. Okay, that's what we mean by literature. So that's why it's called RRL, or the review of related literature. Make sure that you have a collection of whatever that's written about this topic, or whatever is related to the topic at hand. Okay, we now live in, you know, I mean, everything is in the internet, so that's the first thing they have to do first. Okay, try to Google the topic. Okay, there will always be something in the internet that will, you know, give you an idea what the topic is all about, or related studies about the topic. Just, you know, just try to follow all those links provided in the internet, and at least have a clear idea of what the topic is all about. Okay, so you have to like review the literature. Okay, so when you say literature review, usually this is given as an assignment, or this is the first thing that you have to do if you need to do a research. Okay, you don't write the introduction right away. You don't write the articles right away. Okay, the usual activity is that you first do a literature review. Okay, a critical review of the literature. This is usually an activity given to students. Okay, or your advisor may ask you to first do a literature review before you even write the intro or come up with RQs. Okay, so just to be clear, so when you say literature review, it's part of research paper or a thesis or dissertation or any scholarly article, which is usually after the intro. Okay, and before the research methods. In traditional research, okay, in traditional structure of thesis and dissertation, this is the literature review is like chapter 2, or it's a separate chapter. But in revised, in the I wouldn't say revised, but in the current structures of thesis and dissertations, the literature review is part of the introduction, or any journal for that matter. Okay, so the first chapter is always the introduction. The second chapter is usually the methodology. The third, I mean, following the IMRD format. Okay, that's the third aspect, would be the research results and discussion. Then you have the summary and recommendations. And so the RRL is just part of the introduction. It is subsumed under introduction. You cannot go to methodology, okay, without first reviewing the literature. You cannot even propose any research questions without thoroughly reviewing the literature. Okay, so the literature review, or the RRL, needs to cover scholarship that is important to the issue you are writing about. Okay, so you have to look, that's the first thing that you have to do, look for related literature. Okay, read as many literature as possible. Sometimes it will also cover key sources that inform your research methodology. Okay, it's not just the articles written about the topic. Sometimes those articles or sources that also have something to do with the methodology. Okay, I mean, if you're not very familiar with an approach, okay, you might want to also dig deeper into that. Okay, for example, if you want to adapt corpus analysis, corpus-based analysis, and you are not familiar with that, okay, so that also includes your literature review. Then you have to review studies on corpus as well, because you are not familiar with the methodology. Okay, and that's just the method. Okay, that's not even part of your topic. Okay, so literature review helps students and researchers, okay, in many ways. Like it helps them familiarize themselves with a topic and with its scholarship in the field, okay, that's the first thing that you have to do. You have to be familiar with the topic that you'd like to pursue. Get an idea of the other researchers working on the topic that they are interested in, okay? And you need to know that one too. What has been done about the topic? What are the scholars doing about this topic? Now, if you don't find any related literature, it means that nobody is working on that topic. Probably it's not even something that's worth pursuing. It's probably something that's a very specific, okay? Or it's, just what's this now? Just a wild topic that you came up with, okay, one afternoon or one morning, okay, but probably it's not worth investigating at all. You didn't find any related literature. Nobody's talking about that one, okay. So is it worth pursuing? So you have to really check the literature about that one. Also, when you do the literature review, students, okay, would find gaps in existing research in order to propose new projects. That's why you have to again read the literature. What has been done? What has not been done? So the what has not been done would be the gap, okay? And that's the crack that you can enter into. Otherwise, if everything is already covered, you can't find any crack, okay? You can find any gap, then probably it's not worth your topic at hand. It's not worth it. Pursuing at all, because like everything has already been covered. Okay. So you need to know the gaps in the existing literature. Okay. There will always be gaps, of course. That's why you need to know what the gaps are, because that's the rationale of your study. Okay. You would be able to convince the experts, okay, or whoever sits in your panel during the proposal that your current topic is important, that you need to pursue the current topic because, literature says that this one has not been done. Literature says that this particular area of the topic has not been pursued by anyone yet. Okay, and that's why you'd like to do it. You'd like to conduct a research on that. You'd like to investigate it. Okay. Develop a theoretical framework and methodology for later research. You might also want to do that. Okay, you saw that. So these are the usual framework that they do for this particular topic. Okay, and you'd like to develop a theoretical framework. Okay, and then you'd like to propose as well a certain methodology for future researchers. Okay, you can also do that one, and that's what you need to do for a literature review. Okay, so those are the things that you need to keep in mind when you are doing literature review. Okay, so what are the parts of literature review? As I was saying a while ago, in traditional grammar, it used to be a separate chapter where it already has its own intro, body, or conclusion. But even if it's just subsumed under introduction, okay, you always have to introduce your literature review. Okay, any part of your research. If you are doing the methodology, you have to explain or introduce all the subsections. So that's the same with literature review. So you have to introduce your literature review, like an introductory paragraph that explains what you're working topic and thesis is. You just have to repeat what you have earlier mentioned in the introduction. Okay, so for example, this chapter presents the studies that have been done on what is the topic that you're working on. Okay, blah blah blah. Okay, so the introduction also is the forecast of key topics or texts that will appear in the review. Okay, so you will say that in the literature review, I will first start with this and that. Okay, or I'll cover the following gay concepts. Okay, you have to, of course, present the a review of the key concepts in your study, right? So you have to explain how you're going to do that. Okay, so like it's already a forecast of the key topics. First, for example, you would say, I will first cover translanguaging, and then I'll go on multilingualism, after which I'll look at effects and so forth and so on. So that's very clear. Okay, potentially a description of how you found sources and how you analyze them for inclusion and discussion in the review. You may also do that. Okay, you can also say that the studies that I have included here come from this and that, and so forth and so on. Okay, so the body now of your lit review will now be Okay, like the summary of the studies that you will be reviewing. Okay, usually the misconception is that there are a lot of scholars who who dwell too much on the review of related literature. Okay, like that's the thickest part of the thesis. Okay, that's what they work on the longest. Okay, I know a lot of scholars who can't move to the next aspect of the research because they are stuck in the literature review, because the tendency is that when you encounter one study, okay, it interested you, so you want to look more. Okay, you want to investigate more, you want to go through the references listed in that particular study. Okay, and then you went to that one source that was mentioned. Okay, and then when you saw the one, you went to another and another and so forth and so on. So that's the danger. Okay, and most of my MA and PhD students, okay, are stuck in the writing of the literature review. Okay, and they usually tell me, ba't ka ba nagtatagal dyan? Ba't hindi ka patapos sa literature review? Because first I asked them to do the literature review. Doc, kasi when I saw this particular article, okay, I checked the references, and then nakita ko po yung isang article, tapos nagustuhan ko po, okay, it was very interesting, so I read through it again, and then I checked the references, and then I was connected to another article, and so forth and so on. Wala nang kwan yun. Hindi na matapos-tapos. Okay, so you go from one article to another. Okay, magsanga-sanga na yung mga ideas. Lumawak na ng lumawak yung coverage ng iyong topic, and then you are lost already. Like, saan ako pupunta? Okay, parang ang dami-dami ko nang binasa, ang dami-dami ko nang ni-review. So that's usually the danger of literature review. And then you're drowning already with a lot of information, a lot of new concepts. You don't know where to start. You don't know where you're going. Okay, so you have to be very careful with that. Okay, so that's why you should know what you need to pursue. Okay, and it doesn't mean that when you started, for example, looking for a particular topic, okay, reviewing the literature, in most cases, okay, this is what you wanted to do initially, but after reading the literature, naiba ang direction mo, nadagdagan, may binawasan ka, may inextend ka, that happens. Okay, and that's what literature review is all about. Okay, it will give you an idea of what people are doing in relation to this topic. What has been done about that? Kung nakita mo yung isang article, oh, so this is the framework pala that is appropriate for this topic. Okay, oh, one work did this one. I might also do it. Okay, hindi niya ginawa ito, and so forth and so on. Okay, ngayon kung wala kang binasa about your topic, about your the topic that you're working on, then wala kang idea kung anong gagawin mo. Okay, so in the body now of the literature review, okay, you have to summarize and synthesize. So those are two different things. You have to summarize the study that you are including in the review, and then after that one, you are going to synthesize, okay, the study that you have just reviewed. We'll get to that one later on. So you have to give an overview of the main points of each source and combine them into a coherent whole. Some students, some scholars just look at the abstract of articles. Kaya mga iba mas, especially if the related article is a bit difficult to read or it's very long, they just look at the abstract, and that's what they put in the review of related literature. They just cut and paste the abstract. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so you have to give an overview of the main points. Okay, like focus on the methodology, like what RQs does the paper would like to investigate, how did the author, for example, conduct the study, and so on and so on. These are like the main points. And then you go to the findings. Okay, what are the key findings of this study? Okay, and then what are the recommendations of the paper, and so forth and so on. Okay, you've got to analyze and interpret. Don't just paraphrase other researchers. Okay, at times, again, that requires really a skill, no? You have to also add your own interpretation where possible, discussing the significance of findings in relation to the literature as a whole. Okay? So at times you can question, wait lang, itong kanyang ginawa dito, bakit pagdating dito, blah, 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 parang hindi naman niya nasagot yung tanong. Okay? Bakit ganito ang gusto niyang mangyari sa research question, pero pagdating dito sa so forth and so on. So you have to like analyze and interpret. You can actually say, you can question, parang may nawawala dito, parang may kulang. Okay? Pwede pa nga, wait lang, merong hindi clear dito, merong kulang. Wait, dito ako magtatagal. You can actually do that. Okay? I'm running out of time, so I'm just on slide number 12 and it's already 4:20, okay? Then you've got to critically evaluate. You have to mention the strengths and weaknesses of your sources. Then now write in well-structured paragraphs, okay? Yan ang pinakamahaba usually, yung review of related literature. So in doing that once, because you have to move from one source to another, make sure that you use transition words and topic sentences to draw connections, comparisons. Okay, so you start with this one, make sure that when you move to the another source, it should be clear that you are moving to another source. Okay, and it's not a continuation of the previous one. Okay, and then summarize the literature review. Okay, summarize the key findings that you have taken from the literature and emphasize their significance, and then make sure that you connect it back to your primary research questions. Do not just include in the lit review anything, okay, kasi pampadagdag, pampadami ng literature review. Yung mga iba nagbibilang. Uy, ilan na ang lit review mo? Uy, nakasampu na ako ha, ang dami na. Uy, lilima lang ako. It doesn't work that way, okay? Make sure that the work that you are reviewing has a connected, has a connection with your current topic, okay? It is relevant to the current topic. That's why it's called related, okay? So how are you going to organize literature review? I mean, this one is very important. Yung mga iba, sobrang gulo because I was saying that ang dami nilang nabasa, okay? Hindi na nila alam kung how are they going to arrange the literature review. Okay? So it would be helpful if sometimes hindi helpful yung right away you go to your laptop and start writing. Okay? Ako ginagawa ko pa rin yan kahit I'm very technical, I'm very digital. Everything I do it on writing. But there are times na I get a piece of paper, okay? Or kung minsan yung whiteboard, I do that one, okay? So tapos try kong i-review or kung ano yung naalala ko about the topic. So wait lang. So ito ang sinasabi. So paano ko i-arrange ang aking mga nabasang article? Kaya kailangan makikita mo na anong pinakamagandang way para i-present ko yung literature review. So depende sa topic. Okay, there's not a single way of organizing your lit review depending on your topic. Okay, there are some topics that it requires chronological way of organizing your lit review. When you say chronological, you're trying to trace the development of key points over time. Okay, especially if it's an idea, lalo na kapag all about, may bagong approach sa social science, may bagong approach sa let's say sa pagpapalaki ng mga tanim, okay, may bagong inintroduce halimbawa na proseso ng pagpapalaki ng mga alagang baboy or whatever that is. So you can start with, if you're trying to trace now the development of key points, so it has to be, chronological. Okay, so mag-start ka nung, what happened in the in the 2000, and then came this year. So this is what happened, and then that one, blah, blah, blah. So there are some topics that require chronological way of presenting literature. Okay, most of the time I do thematic. Yung mga tipong, because there are some key points in the topic, right? Okay, so you have to group them. Okay, halimbawa, I'm dealing with, for example, intelligibility, comprehensibility, and interpretability. Okay, so magkakaibang theme yun. So I'll do first muna yung first key point, which is all about, intelligibility. Then I'll go on with the comprehensibility. Then I'll go on with the interpretability. Okay, especially kung magkakaibang topics yun. Hindi, you cannot just, randomly just put all together na magkakaiba, walang connection yung mga studies. Okay, so kailangan you decide So, anong unahin ko dito? Ito muna. So, I'll talk more about this topic. Tapos dito, itong theme na dito. Tapos susunod dyan. But there has to be a way of organizing your lit review. Pwede rin methodological. Okay? So, that means that you will be looking at the methodology of the studies. Wait. I'll first group muna yung mga qualitative. Ito puro mga quantitative. So, pag present ko, I'll put all the studies that did quantitative, tapos susunod ko yung qualitative. Okay? O kaya, quanti-quali, kaya ganun. Or kaya, I'll start with empirical and then theoretical. Depende kung ano yung mga methodology ng mga studies na ginamit mo. Okay? You can also divide the research. Halimbawa, at dami mong gustong include sa lit review mo. No? So, you can start with sociological, then you go on with historical, then you go on with the cultural sources. Okay? Depending again on the topic. But there has to be a way of arranging your sources or arranging the literature review. You just don't like put them all together. Okay? Or pwede rin theoretical. Okay? You have to discuss the various theories, models, and definitions of key concepts. Okay? Most of humanities, for example, studies start or do this approach. Okay, the way they organize the literature would be about theoretical. So first they look for studies that talk about this particular theory, okay, and then the next model and blah blah blah. Okay, but there has to be a way of arranging your lit review. So pwede kayong mamili dito. Okay. Then you've got to analyze the literature that you have found. Okay? Hindi lang basta kayo nagbasa, hindi lang kayo po pwede mag-cut and paste. Okay? You've got to analyze. So what are the key terms and concepts? Okay? May mga bago bang pinagsasabi dun sa mga binasa mo or it's just the same thing? Okay? Meron bang mga related na terms? Okay? How relevant is this article to my specific topic? If you don't see any relevance, then discard it from the list. Hindi mo na yun isasama dun sa lit review mo. Okay? What are the major relationships, trends, and patterns? Ito yung pinaka-challenging. Okay? Kasi kung minsan ito ang kanyang sinasabi, pagdating doon sa isang article, iba naman ang kanyang sinasabi. So, kailangan meron kang way of connecting. Wait lang. At anong relationship nito dyan? Anong trend? Okay, wait lang. They are all going to this particular thought. Okay? Parang may pattern. So, you should be able to look at that one. So, that's why we have to look at, the totality of the article. Kaya kailangan naintindihan mo yung binabasa mo. Okay? How has the author structured the argument? So, kailangan mo makita rin na, itong author na to, ang ginawa niya, ay kinokontra niya ito yung mga articles na kinontra niya. Meron din siya mga inayunan ng mga articles. Ganito niya ginawa, so forth and so on. Okay? But it has to be clear to you kung yung nire-review mong study ay paano ginawa ni author ang kanyang arguments? How did the author structure the arguments actually? Okay? You've got to also check the sources, of course, of the article that you are reading. In my case, okay, ang una kong binabasa sa kahit na anong proposal na hinawakan ko or mga thesis na may estudyante ko, I look at the reference section. Okay, so for example, if the topic is about this one, let's say, for example, it's all about, example lang, it's all about Philippine English. Okay, kung yan ang topic mo, titinaw ka agad yung reference section mo. Kung wala yung mga credible sources, wala yung mga sources that you need to study or you need to read or you need to investigate or you should have read, okay, bago ang lahat, then ibig sabihin nun medyo may kulang sa iyong study because you did not mention, okay, the key studies, okay, the important studies related to this topic. So that you have to, be very careful with your references. What are the differences and similarities between the sources? Okay, meron bang pagkakaiba niyan o they're talking about the same thing? Okay, are there any gaps in the literature that require further study? Yun ang hinahanap mo lagi, yung gap. Kasi doon papasok yung study mo. Okay, so these are the things that you need to when you analyze the articles that you are reading. So just some tips in writing the RLL. Most interesting literature reviews are often written as arguments, if you can do that one. Okay, the literature review is where you can establish your research as filling a particular gap or as a relevant in a particular way. Okay, so I've been telling you this one, you should be able to identify the gap. Kasi doon papasok yung iyong proposal. Okay? So, ito lahat ang nangyari sa literature, pero may kulang. So, you have to identify that gap. And then, ipasok mo ngayon yung study mo. And since no one has done that yet, so now you are proposing that your study will do this one. Okay? You can use the intellectual lineage that you would like to be part of and whose definitions matter most to your thinking. Okay? Actually, di ka man obligated na lahat yan ay i-review mo, di ba? Kasi nga may mga contradicting views diyan. So, saan ka mas nag-identify? Okay? Hindi naman black and white lang. Yan na kailangan. Okay, you have to identify yourself towards this one or are you leaning towards this one? Okay? Nangyari yan sa dissertation ko. So my advisor said, ito yung kanyang line of thought, school of thought na fina-follow niya. Para sa akin ay hindi ako convinced doon. Okay? So pinili ko yung intellectual lineage. I followed a particular framework. Okay? And I have a reason for following that one, for as long as it's clear to you. So you can do that. So whose definition matter most to your thinking? Saan ka mas nag-agree? Okay? In addressing these points, you argue for your place in the conversation, which tends to make the literature review more compelling than the simple reporting of other sources. That's why kailangan malaman kung nasaan ang iyong topic sa current debate, sa current conversation on this particular topic. May kwenta ba yung pinapropose mo? Kailangan ba talaga yan? Okay? Kapag tinabi mo sa mga ibang sources na parehong topic, okay? May interesting ba yung topic mo? I mean, may kwenta ba, in other words? Okay? So that's why you have to, identify the gaps. You should know what is going on in literature. Okay? Para makapag-propose ka ng may kwentang topic. Okay? So now, after reviewing all the literature, you have to synthesize. Okay? Ito yung usually na nawawala sa mga most proposals. Kasi ang synthesizing, again, is a very important activity. Okay? You just don't summarize. You have to synthesize. Okay? So synthesizing is when you're looking for areas where your sources agree or disagree and you try to draw broader conclusions about your topic based on what your sources say. Okay? Yun ang synthesizing. Merong mga sources na kumukontra sa isang particular framework, may mga sources naman na nag-agree sa isang framework, may mga sources na question ang credibility ng isang framework. So kailangan i-synthesize mo yun. Okay? So sabihin mo na this one, agree while this one does this one, ito naman ganito ang sinasabi. Okay? At yun ay kailangan mong gawin pagkatapos ng iyong review of related literature. Okay? So a synthesis draws on multiple sources to reach a broader conclusion. What I usually ask my mentees is that they come up with a table. Okay? So ililista lahat nila dito yung mga, ito yung author, ito yung kanyang RQs, ito yung kanyang methodology, ito yung kanyang key findings, okay, and meron siyang remarks. So kapag may ganyang tabular presentation of the research, literature review, napakadali mag-synthesize, okay? Napakadali makita na, ito ang kumbaga trajectory ng mga related literature. So ito, magpa-follow ng ganyan, ito naman, ganito ang sinasabi. Okay? So there are two types of synthesis, explanatory synthesis or argumentative synthesis. So if you are just explaining how the key concepts, okay, are explained, so you're doing that one, okay? Or pwede ka rin namang nag-argue ng mga key concepts, okay? How? You have to begin by grouping your sources by topic and looking for connections. So I showed you already how you can arrange your lit review. So gusto mo bang, thematic? So you have to arrange your sources. Wait, this paper is all about this particular theme. Ito naman, this particular topic is all about this one. There are some, of course, sources that are overlapping. So bahala ka nang dumiskarte kung saan mo siya ilalagay. Okay? Construct your body paragraphs in a way that acknowledges different sources and highlights where you can draw new conclusions. Okay? So that's what the synthesis is all about. So kailangan makita mo yun sa mga sources na iyong i-review. Okay? So, after the review of related literature, you have to synthesize, Okay, like you summarize them and you have to synthesize them, and then you have to draw or you have to identify the research gap. Pagkatapos mong mag-review ng literature, pagkatapos mong i-synthesize lahat ng mga ni-review mo, ano na ngayon? Anong nawawala? Anong gap? Okay, anong nakita mo? So nakita mo na, may kulang dito or something has not been done yet. Okay? Ngayon, doon mo na nga i-introduce yung topic mo. And because of that one, yun na yung gusto mong gawin. Okay? Na research. So yun, doon mo ngayon papasok ang ating research questions. Okay? So after the synthesis, that's where we are going to do now. So just a few points to consider synthesizing. Yeah. Don't force a relationship between sources if there isn't one. Okay? Hindi mo kailangang pilitin. Just do your best to highlight the relationships between sources in very clear ways, and do not ignore also any outliers in your research. It is important to take note of every perspective, even those that disagree with your broader conclusions. Kung minsan yung mga scholars hindi nila ini-include dun sa review of related literature nila yung mga topics na kokontra sa kanilang topic. Okay? Those are the outliers, but you have to just don't ignore them. Okay? They probably are also helpful. So now, just some checklists of the RRL. Have I, outlined the purpose and scope, identified appropriate and credible academic or scholarly literature? Have I recorded the bibliographical details of the sources? Okay, I mean, dapat automatic na yan. While you are reviewing something, okay, record the bibliographical details already. Have I explored methodologies, theories, hypotheses, and models? Okay. Have I identified gaps in literature and research? Have I analyzed, and critique the readings? Okay. Have I discussed the varying viewpoints? Have I written an introduction, body, and conclusion? And have I checked punctuation and spelling? Okay. So just ask this, parang checklist lang ito pagka, okay, nagawa ko na ito lahat. So, okay na ang aking RRL. Okay, now we go to the statement of the problem. So, ang susunod doon sa RRL would be the research questions. They call it the statement of the problem or the research questions. Okay? Sinabi ko to kanina, kung minsan I start with this one. Okay? I mean, if after I have already done a preliminary study of review of what I need to do, then I usually start with the RQs. Okay, so you have to start with a broad topic. Okay, bakit broad topic? Kasi kung very specific, kung minsan wala ka nang makitang literature. So mag-start ka muna sa broad topic and then you go on with the subtopics and then you go on with the potential research questions. But usually you start with broad topic. Okay, and you've got to do brainstorming and concept mapping with friends. At times, kung meron kang naisip na gusto mong research, huwag mong itago sa sarili mo. Okay, I mean over coffee or anything, kahit nasa jeep lang kayo, you share with your friends. Ay, alam mo, parang, naisip ko to, ganyan, ganyan, ganyan. There are just so many things that are born out of conversations or, coffee sessions, okay? Anything, any idea is worth mentioning, okay, with friends. Kasi po pwedeng may contribute sila sa topic mo. Pwedeng, ay, alam mo may gumawa na yan. Oy, alam mo meron akong alam tungkol dyan. Or whatever. You've got to, just do brainstorming, okay? Or do concept mappings with friends because they would contribute to your ongoing topic. Choose an area of study that you are genuinely interested in. Okay? Yung mga iba hindi nila alam kung anong gagawin nila. Okay? Ang lagi nilang tanong is, wala po kong topic. Okay? Hindi ko po alam kung anong gagawin ko for my thesis. My usual answer is, or question to them would be, if there is one topic, okay, if there's one topic that you won't get tired of talking about for the whole day, what would that be? Okay, that's supposed to be would. What would it be? So, tapos si student sabi, ang dami ko, ito po daw, ito lahat yung mga gusto kong topic. But there has to be one topic that you are most passionate about. Okay? Na yung bang hindi ka mapapagod na pag-usapan yun. So yun ang mga dapat mong topic na pinopursue for your thesis. Okay? It means that you are so interested with that topic. Okay? Do preliminary research to learn about the topical issues. I kept on saying this one. Okay? So yeah, the goal of this one is that the preliminary review of related literature allows you to discover issues that are currently being discussed by scholars and fellow researchers, okay? And then also you are able to identify gaps or limitations if you do preliminary research. Hindi ka makakagawa ng questions mo kung hindi ka nagbasa ng literature. Like yung sinasabi yan. You can't write on any topic that you know very little about. So bakit hindi ka makagawa ng RQs mo? Hindi ka pa kasi nagbabasa. Okay, hindi mo pa alam kung anong gagawin mo. Kasi nga iisa o dadalawa pa lang ang binasa mong article. Okay? So I'll keep on saying that one. You can't write on any topic that you know very little about. Okay? Know what the experts and other scholars have done about the topic para alam mo kung saan ka lulugar. Ngayon, kung isa, dalawa, tatlo pa lang ang nababasa mo or apat pa lang, wala kang karapatang mag-propose about that topic. Kulang pa ang nalalaman mo about that topic. Okay? So, lagi mong tatanungin when you do the research objectives, what else can I do? Ito nang ginawa sa mga sources. How will I contribute to the existing literature? May kwenta ba itong aking topic? What has not been done? And what needs to be done? Okay? Lagi mong tatanungin yan. Otherwise, how will I contribute to the existing literature? Baka mamaya wala ka naman may contribute sa literature, di ba? So that kailangan alam mo kung ano ang nasa literature, alam mo kung ano nang nagawa para meron kang maisip na dapat gawin kasi yun ang kulang. Okay? Developing good research objectives questions require that you narrow down your topic and determine potential research questions. Okay? Again, hindi ito permanente pag nagsulat ka ng research questions. Pwede mo siyang ibahin anytime. You can always revise that one. Okay? So what Sandberg and Alveson are suggesting is you do gap spotting. Number 1 yan. Ano ang gap? Kanina pa sinasabi yan. Okay? Ano ang gap? Kasi kung ano ang nawawala dun sa literature, ano yung gap? Ano pa yung hindi nako-cover, yun ang dapat mong gawin. Okay? And then Sandberg and Alveson are also talking about problematization. Okay? It aims to challenge and scrutinize assumptions that supports others and the researcher's theoretical position. Okay? This means constructing research questions that challenge your views or knowledge of the area of study. Yun talagang poproblemahin mo. Kasi hindi mo talaga siya masagot. Okay? Hindi lang siya nasasagot ng Google. Okay? Hindi siya nasasagot ng simpleng yes or no lang. You really have to investigate. Kaya kailangan mo mag-research. Kasi itong problema mo na ito ay hindi masagot ng an ordinary just discussion. And Lipovsky also suggested, considering also the personal experiences of the researcher, like reflect on problematic areas of their practice. Sometimes there are just some things that you'd like to pursue because, they are interested in that one or based on your personal experience. I have 4 minutes. Okay. So these are, you probably have seen this one in evaluating the soundness of your research question. Okay. These are the things that you have to always consider. Is it feasible? These are the finer criteria. F stands for, is it feasible? Magagawa niyo ba yan? Okay, kaya bang gawin niyo ng 3 buwan? Kaya bang gawin niyo ng 1 taon? Posible bang gawin yan? Kaya ba yan ng budget mo? Kaya mo bang gawin yan? Mag-isa ka lang. Feasible. Is it interesting? Okay, baka naman hindi yan interesting. Is it novel? Okay, new. Baka naman ang dami nang gumawa niyan. I mean, kumbaga, sad-sad na yung topic na yan. Okay? Is it ethical? I mean, we discussed already the ethical this morning. And again, is it relevant? Okay? Is it important in the current discussion? So, finer criteria. Always keep the one in mind. Okay? Laging nyo itong nakikita yung finer criteria na yan. Okay? In developing good research questions, when you construct also the research questions properly, there are some things that you need to consider. Okay, and Richardson have this PICOT framework. Okay, Doc Bing mentioned this one already a while ago. P stands for population, patients, and problem. And then I would be for the intervention or indicator being studied. The C would be the comparison group. The O would be for outcome of interest. And T would be the time frame of study. I'm giving you an example here. Between the ages of 5 and 18, our children are of parents with diagnosed mental health issues at increased risk of depression of anxiety compared with children of parents with no diagnosed mental health issues. So ano dyan yung PICOT na to? So yung population dyan would be children, yung intervention would be yung parents with diagnosed mental health issues. Yung comparison naman dyan ay the children of parents with no diagnosed mental health issues, and then the outcome would be the increased risk of depression or anxiety. And then the timeline would be between the ages of 5 and 18. Okay, just to show you an example. Para wala na tayong time for that activity, no? So just show you, I'm just showing you here an example of a bad RQ and a good RQ. Okay, lagi ko itong nakikita. Okay, this is an example. How does social media affect people's behavior? Okay, bakit siya bad na RQ? For one, it's napaka-broad. Social media, napakadaming social media na ngayon. Okay? Pag sabi mong people's behavior, anong people's behavior? Napaka-wide din nung people or even the behavior. Okay? Ay napakadaming behavior. So, lahat ng keywords dyan ay puro vague. Okay? It's too broad. Okay? So, look at the better version of that one. Yeah, it's very generic, sabi ni Patricia. Napaka-generic. Okay? Hindi mo alam kung paano sagutin kasi sobrang generic. But look at this one. Okay? Now, this is more specific. What effect does the daily use of YouTube have on the attention span of children aged under 16? So, not very specific, right? Hindi lang basta people. Okay? Hindi lang basta kanilang behavior. Yung attention span lang ang gusto mong makita. Hindi lahat ng social media, YouTube lang ang gusto mong makita. Okay? At hindi apekto, so it's now more specific. Okay? Hindi na siya vague at hindi na siya generic. Okay? I'll give you another. So look at this one. Has there been an increase in childhood obesity in the Philippines in the past 10 years? Ano sa tingin nyo ang problema dito sa... Is it good or bad, RQ? Muna. Are you still with me? It's 4:45. Hello? Okay, is it good or bad, RQ? Bad, sabi ni Patricia. Okay, bakit? Anong nakikita niyong diferensya? Okay, sige, sagutin ko na rin yung aking tanong. Okay? It's very simple. Has there been an increase in childhood obesity in the Philippines in the past 10 years? Baka i-google mo lang yan, meron ka ng sagot dyan. It can easily be answered by yes or no, right? And usually, has there been an increase? Parang masyadong obvious. Yes, there has been an increase. Okay, dumami na ang obese sa Pilipinas in the last 10 years. Hindi mo kailangan ng research para tanungin yan. Okay, so let's fine-tune this very broad, very simple, okay, RQ. Look at this one. How have school intervention programs and parental education levels affected the rate of childhood obesity among 1st to 6th grade students? Okay, now it's very clear, di ba? Ang gusto mo lang makita would be yung ang gusto mo makita yung school intervention programs, okay? At saka yung parental education, okay? Ano ang mga yung parental education levels? Ano ang mga epekto nito sa childhood obesity, and not like children obesity in general, but just the 1st to 6th grade students. Okay, so now it's very clear that you will be investigating the school intervention programs, okay, and the parental education levels. So yun ang gusto mong makita. May kinalaman ba ang mga ito sa obesity? Hindi yung tatanungin mo lang kung nag-increase ba ang cases ng obesity sa Pilipinas. Okay, so I'm just showing you. So this one now is more complicated. Hindi yan nasasagot lang ng yes or no. Okay, hindi mo lang pwedeng i-google yan. Okay, you now the researcher now have to collect data. Kailangan mong mag-perform ng in-depth analysis, and you have to form an argument that leads to further discussion. Okay, so yan ang kailangan mong gawin. So now that's worth an RQ. Okay, so these are just important points to keep in mind in creating RQs. Okay, like the development of research question is an iterative process that involves continuously updating one's knowledge on the topic and refining ideas at all stages. Okay, sinabi ko na kanina na hindi yan permanente. Pagkatapos mong mag-review ng related literature, pwede mong i-fine-tune yung RQs mo earlier. Okay, kahit nga kapag nakapag-conduct ka na, yung nasa methodology mo na, tapos ka na, naisip mo na, ay, hindi pala dapat ganun ang pagkakatanong ko. Hindi pala dapat ganun yung RQ ko. Pwede mo pa rin ibahin yan. Okay? Remain updated on current trends, state-of-the-art research studies, and technological advances in the field of study that you are pursuing. Okay? All of these ones are actually common sense. Okay? Because I'd like to focus last on the methodology. Okay? Importante na kapag ito ang RQs mo, may corresponding methodology. Okay? Now, this one describes the actions taken to investigate a research problem and the rationale for the application of specific procedures or techniques used to identify, select, process, and analyze information applied to understanding the problem. Dr. Bing has already started talking about this one. Okay? These are the two usually main sections of the methodology. Okay, like how was the data collected or generated, and how was it analyzed. But some researches require a more detailed subsections in the methodology. Like first would be like, who are the participants or who are the subjects, okay, or the people involved, okay? And then syempre mag-start sa research design. Is it quanti or quali? Is it mixed methods? Okay? Kasi hindi clear-cut kung quanti ka lang or quali. Most people would, do, for example, a mixed methods. Or will you be employing corpus-based in your analysis and so forth and so on? Okay? Will there be instruments that are involved? Okay? So what are the importance of good methodology sections? So now, I'll be giving this one to you anyway, so you can just look at this one. Okay, readers need to know how the data was obtained because the method you chose affects the results. Kung minsan, tinitignan ko kagad yung methodology. If I need to like review a lot of studies, for example, I'm asked to sit down in a panel where I have to review like 10 proposals, okay, in one sitting. I don't have to like check already the introduction because that's for the researcher. Kailangan alam niya kung ano sinasabi niya. I'll look at the RQs. Kung ito yung gusto mong investigate, ito yung research question mo. Tignan ko kung tama ba yung methodology mo. Masasagot ba ang iyong research question ng iyong methodology? Kung hindi yan nagtugma, okay, right away, your proposal is not approved. Okay? Crucial yan. Ito ang research question mo, paano mo siya masasagot? Okay? So that's methodology is crucial for any branch of scholarship because that's the, if the methodology is unreliable, it means that the results are unreliable. Okay? Hindi mo masasagot yung tanong. So kailangan i-describe mo methodology mo sa proposal. Okay? At yan ang laging tinitingnan ng mga experts. Masasagot mo ba ang tanong? Okay? So effectively written methodology section includes, okay, introduce the overall methodological approach for investigating your research problem. I was just saying about this one. Is it qualitative? Is it quantitative? Is it a combination of both? Okay, are you going to take a special approach? Is it an actual research or is it a more neutral stance? Okay, indicate how the approach fits the overall research design. Okay, so kung ikaw ay mag-corpus study, which is a combination of quali and quanti, paano siya, how does it fit the whole overall design? Pwede kasing magkakaiba ang approach mo sa mga RQs. So ito yung RQ mo, hindi siya masasagot ng isang design lang. For this particular RQ, you need an interview, you need an FGD, okay? For this particular RQ, you need a questionnaire, okay? For this particular research question, you need a corpus investigation. Okay? So, pwedeng magkakaiba ang methodology mo depende sa iyong RQ. Okay? So, you have to describe the specific methods of data collection that you are going to use. Okay? Importante yan. Sinabi na rin yun ni Dr. Biso, hindi ko na uulitin. Okay? Effectively written methodology section includes, okay, I'll just go through this one, explain how you intend to analyze your results. Okay? Tinitingnan din yan ng mga experts. Paano mo i-analyze ang results? Okay? Provide background and a rationale for methodologies that are unfamiliar for your readers. Bakit ito ang methodology ginamit mo? Okay? Kailangan meron kang rationale dyan. Especially kung bagong technique yan. Okay? Sabihin mo, I will employ, for example, ethnography. Okay, or photoethnography. Bakit yan ang iyong gagamitin na method? Okay? What the justification for subject selection and sampling procedure? Okay, bakit 10 lang ang kinuha mo per age range? Okay, bakit walang lalaki na participant? Okay, bakit within this age lang? There has to be a justification for the subject selection. There has to be like an explanation of the criteria that you used in selecting your participants. Okay, effectively written methodology section includes, the justification for case study selection and the potential limitations. Okay, I mean, if you are employing a case study, okay, and what are the potential limitations also of your methodology. So now I go to the concluding points. I hope to finish at exactly 5 o'clock. Okay, read, and read. Wala kang pwedeng isulat kung hindi ka magbasa. The next point, read again. Next point, you need to read more. Next point, you have to read that article. Next point, you have to read those articles. Hindi pwedeng isa lang, hindi pwedeng dalawa lang. Okay? In other words, you've got to read to be able to come up with a proposal. Kung wala kang binasa, wala kang karapatang magsulat ng proposal. Kung hindi ka nagbasa, wala kang i-propose. Kung hindi ka nagbasa, hindi mo alam kung saan ka pupunta. Okay? So it all boils down to you've got to read the literature. You've got to read, and read. Okay? So the usual pitfalls of research proposal would be, it's too ambitious. Okay? Gusto mong i-cover lahat. Kasi na-overwhelm ka dun sa mga binasa mo. Gusto kong gawin to, gusto kong gawin yan. It's not feasible at all. Hindi pwedeng gawin ng isang tao. Hindi pwedeng gawin ng 2 taon. Hindi mo pwedeng gawin based on your budget. So, if your proposal is too ambitious, most likely hindi yan i-approve. The researcher has not established the credibility in conducting such a topic. Wala namang inoffer na ganyang approach, halimbawa sa undergrad mo or sa MA mo. Pero halimbawa wala kayong course na corpus linguistics, pero ang approach mo, corpus-based analysis. Anong karapatan mong mag-corpus-based analysis? Wala naman kayong proper training, di ba? Gusto mo mag-ethnography. Saan mo natutunan ang ethnography? Wala lang po, may nabasa lang ako, gusto kong gamitin. Okay? Hindi po pwedeng ganon. You have to establish first the credibility as a researcher. Kaya mo bang gawin yan? Okay? The topic is obsolete, dated, and has lost its magic. Okay? So, kailangan, again, you have to review the literature. Baka naman yung topic mo ay 20 years ago pa pinag-uusapan. Okay? If no to little relevance in the current debate or literature. So, kapag hindi masyadong importante, yun ang usual pitfall of a research proposal. Okay? I don't even have to tell you why research is important. Everyone is talking about this one. Okay? Nakita nyo naman kung ano ang ginagawang effort ng inyong university para lang mabuhay ang inyong research sa inyong university. Okay? I don't have to rationalize why research is important. Okay? So at this point, I'm just showing you here select references of my study, of my presentation, and thank you for listening. 5 more minutes before 5 o'clock. Maraming salamat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shirley and Dita. Once again, it is a pleasure and it's a privilege to have you again as a resource speaker. Indeed, a well-written research proposal is important because it outlines the research objectives, it demonstrates the feasibility of the study, and it ensures ethical considerations, such as it would also reduce errors and misinterpretations, and it would provide a blueprint for the research project. So at this point, we are going to open the floor for any questions or clarifications. Do you have any questions, po, before we proceed with the presentation of the certificate of appreciation?
Parang
Questions,
feeling
po, for
ko, oo. Parang feeling ko, pagod na sila. Parang this is the 4th topic already. Kaya nyo pa ba? Sige, I would understand kung hindi na kayo magtatanong, okay?
I think we have po siguro one question. In the process of research proposal, does it mean that upon starting with the research topic, there is a need first of having review of related review before proceeding to the rest of the introductory concepts of research?
Yes,
Or
okay.
do
Oo, kanino ko sinasabi yan? Kung hindi mo ni-review ang literature, anong sasabihin mo? Okay, saan ka pupunta? You won't know anything if you have not reviewed the literature. It all starts with the review of related literature. Kaya kung minsan yung mga iba, makikita mo pag hindi sila nagbasa ng literature. Hindi nila alam kung anong sinasabi nila sa RQs. Hindi rin nila alam kung paano i-introduce yung topic kasi wala pa silang nabasa. Okay, I had one slide which only contains the keyword read. That's what you need to do. Read, read, and read. Okay? At times pa yung mga nagbibigay ng proposal sa akin, isa lang sinasabi ko kung minsan, makikita mo na kaagad kung hindi nagbasa yung researcher. Read more. Okay? Ganun lang. Read more. Ibig sabihin nun, makikita mo na sa references kung yan ay nabasa ba niya yung mga dapat niyang basahin. Okay? Makikita mo with the way na arrange ang kanyang intro kung nagbasa ba yan o hindi. Okay? Is there a specific number or standard number of RRL po? Nung una, tama, good point, Florigine. Okay? Sa amin dati at least in our department, no, meron kaming list kapag yan ay MA or PhD, okay, or undergrad. But hindi na namin, it's not anymore a hard rule, okay? Back in my PhD years, that was in the early 2000, okay, ang minimum na reference na isa-cite mo sa iyong references ay for an IP 50. Okay? Hindi ka po pwedeng mag-propose kung wala kang minimum ng 50 dati. Okay? Actually now, I require more. Okay? Sa MA ko, minimum na yung 50 sa akin. Okay? I mean, kung 50 lang ang resources mo, paano ka makakapag-propose ng isang matino-tinong thesis kung 50 resources lang ang nabasa mo? Okay? Yung mga iba, lalo na kung nabasa mo lang ay 5 or 10, that means you need to read more. Okay? So that has been a practice. So tinitira namin yun sa masters kapag I mean, if it's a master's thesis, okay, it's always more than 50. Parang basic na yung 50. Kapag 50 lang yung nakalagay sa reference section mo, parang gusto namin sabihin, oh my God, ito lang ang kanyang nabasa. So again, people will always be like suggesting that you need to read this one, you have to include this one in your references, you need to do this and that. So magsisimula ka doon. Okay, so the more resources that you can include in the reference section, the better. That means that you have read more. Questions pa po?
Okay. No questions na po, Doc. So, once again, read more and read more and read once again.
Read once again. Read again. Read more. Okay.
Okay. So, thank you
Yung
so
mga
much
iba,
po
tanda
again.
ko yung aking advisor dati. Pag may tinatanong ako, hindi niya sinasagot. Okay? So, may tinatanong konsepto, hindi niya sinasagot. Ang sagot lang niya sa akin, read. Ganun lagi. May tatanong naman ako, Doc, gusto kong liwanagin niya. Hindi niya sinasagot yun. Ang sagot lang niya sa akin, read. Okay? Usually yun ang hindi alam ng mga estudyante. Meron silang, may feeling yung mga estudyante na they just ask, random questions from their advisor and they expect the advisor to just answer the questions. Yung mga ibang advisor na napakababait, they answer the questions. Okay? But some really strict advisors, they won't answer your question. They will just ask you to read. Kung tinatanong mo yan, ibig sabihin hindi mo pa nababasa, hindi mo pa na-encounter yan sa mga binasa mo. You need to read more. Yun. Okay.
Okay.
I have to stop.
Thank
It's
you
already
so
5
much po.
minutes.
So at this point po, to show our sincerest thanks and appreciation, let me present po the Certificate of Recognition. Let me just read the citation. Republic of the Philippines, Laguna State Polytechnic University, Province of Laguna, College of Teacher Education, Graduate Studies and Applied Research awards this certificate of recognition to Dr. Shirley N. Dita in recognition of her invaluable and exemplary service rendered as resource speaker during the CTE GSAR Research Webinar Series with the theme Reinforcing the Graduate Students' Research Capability Towards Increased Research Outcomes, held on March 4, 2023 via Zoom conferencing, given on the 4th day of March 2023, Laguna State Polytechnic University, Siniloan, Laguna, signed by our University President, Dr. Mario R. Biones. So once again po, thank you so much, Dr. Shirley and Dita, for that extensive talk on research proposal writing. So at this point po, may I request everyone to please turn on your cameras for a photo op with Dr. Shirley and Dita.
Thank you, LSPU. I hope to see your campus soon.
Yes po, Doc. So we have po 3 galleries. Please hold your smiles. So first gallery, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So second gallery po. Just one moment. Hold your smiles. 1, 2, 3. Okay, third po. Hold your smiles. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So thank you so much po for once again, thank you so much, Dr. Dita. So again, that concludes the first session of the webinar series. Our second session will be on March 11, 2023. And that second session will talk about research and research proposal writing in the humanities with Dr. Fiorilio Demeterio III. It would be followed by design and construction of research instruments with Ms. Monica Rene Policarpio, and the last would be dissemination and publication with Dr. Rochelle Irene Lucas. So also the evaluation link for today's session will be sent on the chat box. So please don't forget po to accomplish. And once again, thank you so much to our resource speakers to the students and the LSP admin officials for gracing this event. We hope to see you again on the next session. Have a wonderful day po. So once again
Thank
po,
you, everyone.
thank you po.
Thank you po.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Sir Josh, for hosting the program.
Thank you
Thank
po.
Thank you po.
So once again po, the link has been sent on the chat box po.